Story 1.
I trusted my sister with my daughter's future, and she fed it to a food truck. That's the version I tell people now because it's easier than explaining the whole thing. Easier than describing what it feels like to sit at your own Thanksgiving table, stuffing still warm in the dish, and watch your entire world crack open on a laptop screen while your sister pours herself another glass of Pinot Grigio like nothing's wrong. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Dana. I'm 41. I've been a single mother since my daughter Lily was 3, which means I've been doing this alone for 15 years in a 2-bedroom house in Westerville, Ohio, working as an office manager at a dental practice. I don't say that for sympathy. I say it so you understand what $47,000 means to someone like me. That wasn't investment money. That wasn't inherited wealth. That was 15 years of skipping vacations, driving a car with 200,000 miles on it, eating rice and beans on Fridays, so I could put $200, $300, sometimes $400 a month into a savings account, earmarked for one thing: Lily's college fund. My sister Bridget was the one who helped me set it up. She worked at a credit union for 6 years, knew the best interest rates, knew how to structure everything. When she suggested a joint account so she could help me manage it, move money around when rates changed, handle paperwork when I was busy, I didn't think twice. She was my sister. She was all I had left after our parents died. I handed her the keys to my daughter's future and I thanked her for taking them. For 3 years, everything looked fine. Bridget would text me quarterly updates. "Fun's looking good, sis. Hit 45K this month." I'd feel this warm rush of pride like I was actually pulling it off. Like Lily was going to walk onto the campus at Ohio State without the crushing debt that had buried me for a decade after my own degree. I never logged into the account myself. Why would I? Bridget had it handled. Bridget always had everything handled. Then came Thanksgiving 2023. Lily was upstairs FaceTiming her boyfriend. Bridget was in the kitchen doing dishes. I sat down at the dining table to look up a recipe on Bridget's laptop, which she'd left open. The browser had 2 tabs. One was Pinterest. The other was the credit union's online portal. I almost didn't click it. I almost went straight to Pinterest. But the tab showed a balance preview and the number I saw made my hand freeze over the trackpad. $4,211. I stared at it. I clicked the tab. I read it again. I scrolled down through the transaction history and the kitchen sounds behind me. Water running, Bridget humming some song. They went muffled like someone had stuffed cotton in my ears. Withdrawal after withdrawal after withdrawal. 2,000 here, 1,500 there. Sometimes 3 times a month. All going to the same external account. Over 3 years, $42,000 had been siphoned out of my daughter's college fund. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely scroll. I started clicking on the transfer details. The receiving account was registered to a name I recognized. Derek Molina. Bridget's boyfriend of 2 years. The guy who'd been launching a gourmet taco truck called Fuego Bites that, as far as I could tell, had never actually served a single taco to a paying customer. Every family gathering, Derek talked about his brand and his investor pipeline and his plans to franchise. I'd smiled and nodded. I'd even bought one of his branded t-shirts. $25. To the man who was stealing my daughter's education. I took photos of every screen, every transaction, every transfer detail. My hands were still shaking, but some cold, clear part of my brain had taken over. The part that had kept me alive through a divorce, through burying both parents in the same year, through all of it. I screenshotted everything and sent it to my own email. Then I closed the tab and walked into the kitchen. Bridget turned around, drying a casserole dish, and smiled at me. "You want me to wrap up the leftover pie?" I looked at her face. The same face I'd known for 41 years. The face that had cried next to me at Mom's funeral. The face that had held Lily as a baby when I was too exhausted to stand. And I said, "Sure, Pie sounds great. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed running the math over and over. Lily's acceptance to Ohio State had come in October. We'd celebrated with cake. She'd cried happy tears. Tuition, room, and board books, we'd budgeted it all based on a fund that no longer existed. Freshman year started in August. That was 6 months away. 6 months and I had $4,000 where there should have been $47,000. I called Bridget 3 days later. I didn't ambush her. I didn't scream. I asked her to meet me at a Panera near her apartment because I thought a public place would keep me from doing something I'd regret. She showed up in yoga pants holding an iced coffee looking like it was any other Tuesday. I set my phone on the table between us, screen up showing the account statement. Explain this. The color left her face in stages. First her cheeks, then her lips. Then even her ears went white. She didn't pick up the phone. She didn't need to. She knew exactly what she was looking at. Dana, I was going to put it back. That sentence, I will hear that sentence on my deathbed. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, when I'm old and fading, those 6 words will still be rattling around in my skull. I was going to put it back. As if $42,000 is a library book. As if you can just slide it back on the shelf and no one notices it was gone. Derek's truck is about to take off, she said. We have investors coming in January. I swear to God, Dana, I was going to replace every penny before Lily needed it. Lily needs it now, Bridget. She needs it in 6 months. I know. I know. And I'll figure it out. Just give me... You've had 3 years. My voice didn't crack. I wanted it to. I wanted to cry, to scream, to flip the table. But nothing came out except this flat, dead calm that scared me more than anger would have. You've had 3 years and $42,000, and you've given it to a man who sells nothing from a truck that doesn't run. She started crying. Real tears, messy tears, the kind that make people at other tables look over. She told me Derek had promised returns. She told me the truck had equipment problems, permit delays, bad luck. She told me she loved him and she'd made a mistake, and she was sorry. She was so sorry. I sat there and watched my sister cry, and I felt nothing. That was the worst part. Not the money. Not the betrayal. The nothing. The realization that the person sitting across from me was a stranger who happened to share my DNA. Are you going to tell Lily? She whispered. I'm going to do whatever I have to do to get my daughter to college in August. I hired a lawyer the following week. A woman named Carla who specialized in financial fraud and didn't blink when I told her the defendant would be my own sister. She said the case was strong. Joint account, documented unauthorized transfers, clear paper trail to a third party. She said we could pursue civil recovery and potentially criminal charges for theft by deception. Bridget called me 14 times the day she was served. I let every call go to voicemail. Her messages started apologetic and ended threatening. She said I was tearing the family apart. She said Mom and Dad would be ashamed of me. She said that to me. The one who'd spent 15 years saving? The one who'd been stolen from? Derek, for his part, vanished. Closed his social media, shut down the Fuego Bites website. Bridget told my cousin he'd moved to Kentucky. The food truck, I later learned, had been repossessed by a lender in November, a full month before Thanksgiving. Which means, when Bridget was still texting me those cheerful updates about the fund, she already knew the money was gone and the business it went to was dead. The court date is in March. My lawyer is confident we'll get a judgment. Whether Bridget can actually pay is another question. She has a condo with some equity. She has a retirement account. Carla says we can pursue garnishment. It'll be slow. It'll be ugly. In the meantime, I started a GoFundMe that Lily doesn't know about. I picked up weekend shifts at a catering company. Lily's high school counselor helped us apply for emergency financial aid and last-minute scholarships. We'll cobble it together. We always do. Lily asked me last week why Aunt Bridget wasn't coming to Christmas. I told her we'd had a disagreement. She looked at me with those sharp, knowing eyes, she's 18, not stupid, and said, "Is it about money?" I said, "Yeah, baby, it's about money." She hugged me and said, "We'll be okay, Mom." And I held my daughter in my kitchen in Westerville, Ohio, and I thought about all the rice and beans, all the skipped vacations, all the Friday nights. I said no to myself so I could say yes to her future. I thought about my sister's face at Panera, white as paper, mouth full of promises that were already broken before she made them. Some people will tell you blood is thicker than water. That family forgives. That you should keep the peace at any cost. But those people have never watched someone they love steal from their child and call it borrowing. I'm not keeping the peace. I'm keeping the receipts.
Story 2.
I trusted my doctor for 2 years while a tumor grew inside me to the size of a grapefruit. He told me it was anxiety. He told me it was irritable bowel syndrome. He wrote in my chart in permanent ink in a medical record that followed me everywhere that I was drug seeking. And I believed him. I believed him over my own body, over every scream my insides made at 3 in the morning when I was curled on the bathroom floor, sweating through my clothes, biting down on a rolled up washcloth, so I wouldn't wake my daughter. My name is Maya Okonkwo. I'm 36 years old. I live in Philadelphia. And I almost died because a man with a white coat and a reputation decided I wasn't worth listening to. It started when I was 32. The pain came in episodes, sudden, brutal, like someone was wringing out my intestines with both hands. I'd be fine for a week, sometimes 2, and then it would hit without warning. At work, in the car, in the middle of reading my daughter a bedtime story, I'd go white. I'd sweat through my shirt. I couldn't stand up straight. My primary care doctor referred me to Dr. Richard Lassiter at Temple University Hospital. Gastroenterology. Published researcher. Department chair. The kind of doctor whose name other doctors say with a little reverence in their voice. I remember feeling lucky to get the appointment. The first visit, he spent maybe 12 minutes with me. He pressed on my abdomen, asked about my diet, asked about my stress levels. I told him I was a single mom, working full-time as a paralegal. He nodded like I'd just confirmed something for him. He diagnosed me with IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. Told me to cut out gluten and dairy, prescribed a low-dose antispasmodic, and said to come back in 6 weeks. I did everything he said. Everything. I overhauled my diet. I kept a food journal. I downloaded a meditation app because he said stress was probably a major trigger. The pain didn't stop. It got worse. The episodes lasted longer, came closer together. I started losing weight, not a little, a lot. 15 pounds in 3 months. My clothes hung off me. My coworkers noticed. My mom noticed. I noticed. But when I went back to Dr. Lassiter and told him the treatment wasn't working, that the pain was escalating, that I was losing weight, I couldn't afford to lose. He barely looked up from his laptop. He adjusted the antispasmodic dose. He added a low-dose antidepressant. He told me IBS is a chronic condition and that I needed to manage my expectations. I asked about imaging. An MRI, a CT scan, something. He said it wasn't indicated. He said my symptoms were consistent with IBS and that ordering unnecessary scans would just expose me to radiation and run up my insurance. He said it in this patient, almost paternal tone, like he was protecting me from myself. The third visit is the one that haunts me. The pain had gotten so bad that I'd gone to urgent care twice between appointments. I was barely eating because everything triggered an episode. I'd started missing work. I sat across from him, and I said I remember the exact words. Dr. Lassiter, something is really wrong with me. This isn't just IBS. Can we please look deeper? He leaned back in his chair and asked me what I thought was wrong. Not in a curious way, in a testing way. I said I didn't know, that's why I was asking him. He said, Maya, I've been doing this for 23 years. I've seen thousands of patients with your exact presentation. This is a functional disorder. The more you fixate on it, the worse it gets. Then I made my mistake. I asked about pain management. I said the antispasmodic wasn't touching the pain during episodes, and asked if there was something stronger I could take even just to have on hand for the worst nights. His whole demeanor shifted. He got quiet. He said he didn't prescribe opioids for functional disorders. I said I wasn't specifically asking for opioids, I just wanted something that worked. He said I understand in a way that made it clear he didn't believe me. I found out later what he wrote in my chart that day. Under clinical notes, patient is focused on pain medication. Possible drug-seeking behavior. Recommend continued conservative management. Those words drug-seeking became a tattoo I couldn't wash off. Every doctor, every urgent care visit, every ER trip after that, they'd pull up my chart and I could see it in their eyes. The subtle shift. The slight cooling. I went from being a patient to being a problem. I started doubting myself. That's the part that's hardest to talk about. Maybe it was anxiety. Maybe I was making it worse by worrying. Maybe I had a low pain tolerance. Maybe I was being dramatic. My own mother, God love her gently, suggested I try yoga. My best friend sent me an article about the gut-brain connection. Everyone around me had absorbed Dr. Lassiter's diagnosis like it was gospel, and I started absorbing it too. I stopped advocating for myself. I stopped asking questions. I just lived with the pain. I white-knuckled through episodes and told myself this was my life now. I told myself I was the kind of person whose body overreacts to stress, and that I needed to be tougher. I lost 2 years to that lie. On a Tuesday night in February, the pain hit different. It was sharper, deeper, and it didn't let up. By midnight, I couldn't walk. My mom came to stay with my daughter, and I drove myself to the ER at Jefferson Hospital, not Temple, because I couldn't face going back there. I was triaged, given IV fluids, and waited. The attending was busy with a trauma case, so the resident on the night shift, a young woman maybe 28, named Dr. Priya Anand, came to see me. She pressed on my abdomen and I nearly came off the table. She looked at my chart, she saw the IBS diagnosis, she saw the drug-seeking note, and then she did something no one had done in 2 years. She paused. She looked at me and said, "How long have you been losing weight?" I told her. She asked how long the episodes had been escalating. I told her. She asked if anyone had ever ordered a CT scan. I said no. My doctor said it wasn't indicated. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, "I'm going to order one. I want to rule some things out." Just like that. No argument, no lecture, no skepticism. She just ordered the scan. I lay in that CT machine at 2 a.m, shivering under a thin blanket, and I remember thinking it would come back clean and prove Dr. Lassiter right and prove me crazy. It didn't come back clean. Dr. Anand came back into my room and she'd been crying. I could tell she'd wiped her face, but her eyes were red. She sat on the edge of my bed, which doctors don't usually do, and she told me they'd found a large mass, on my colon. The size of a grapefruit. She said they needed to do more tests, but it was almost certainly cancer. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just said I knew something was wrong. And she said, "You were right. I'm so sorry." Stage 3, colorectal cancer. If it had been caught 2 years earlier when I first walked into Dr. Lassiter's office, it likely would have been stage 1. Highly treatable. Survival rates above 90%. By the time Dr. Anand found it, it had spread to my lymph nodes. My survival odds had been cut roughly in half. I had surgery 3 weeks later. They removed a section of my colon and 17 lymph nodes. Then came 6 months of chemotherapy that nearly broke me. I lost my hair, my appetite, my ability to work. My daughter, who was 7, learned to bring me a bucket before I even asked. But I survived. I'm still here. And then I got angry. Not the hot explosive kind. The cold kind. The kind that hires a lawyer. We filed a medical malpractice suit against Dr. Lassiter and the hospital. During discovery, my attorney subpoenaed his patient records. We found 11 other cases, 11 where women, most of them black or brown, had presented with serious symptoms and been diagnosed with anxiety, IBS, or functional disorders without adequate workup. 3 of them had eventually been diagnosed with conditions that had progressed because of the delay. 1 woman had died. Her name was Denise Carter. She was 41. She had 2 sons. Her symptoms were nearly identical to mine. He told her it was stress. The hospital settled with me out of court for a number I'm not allowed to disclose. Dr. Lassiter was not fired. He was reassigned to a research role and quietly removed from patient-facing duties. No public statement. No admission of wrongdoing. His name is still on published papers. He still has his medical license. The state medical board reviewed the complaints and issued a formal reprimand. A reprimand for a pattern of negligence that cost 1 woman her life and nearly cost me mine. I tell this story now because I need you to hear something. If your body is telling you something is wrong, it is wrong. If your doctor dismisses you, find another doctor. If they write drug seeking in your chart, demand it be amended. If they won't listen, make them document their refusal in writing. I spent 2 years apologizing for my own pain. 2 years shrinking myself to fit inside a diagnosis that was never mine. I will never do that again. And if Richard Lassiter ever hears this, I want him to know that I remember every single time he looked at his laptop instead of looking at me. I hope he remembers too.
Story 3.
I spent 40 years of my life drawing property lines. 40 years walking through woods, wading through creeks, hammering stakes into red clay, and telling people exactly where their land ended and someone else's began. I've seen grown men cry over 6 inches of dirt. I've watched families tear apart over a drainage ditch. I've testified in court 17 times, and every single time the line I drew held up. So when I retired to my 3 acres outside Greenville, Tennessee, I figured the one thing I'd never have to worry about was somebody moving a line on me. I was wrong. My wife Carol passed in 2021. Breast cancer. After that, I didn't do much. I sat on my porch. I drank coffee. I watched the birds hit the feeder. I let the grass grow a little longer than she would have liked. The house next door, a beat-up rancher on about 1.5 acres, sat empty for almost a year after old Mrs. Pemberton went into assisted living. Then, in March of 2023, a man named Dale Burgess bought it. Dale was what they call a real estate flipper around here, though that's a generous term. He bought distressed properties, slapped lipstick on them, and sold them to people moving down from up north who didn't know any better. He had a White Ram 3500, a Yeti cooler permanently mounted in the bed, and the kind of handshake that squeezed too hard. He knew people at the county. He said so within the first 5 minutes of meeting me. I nodded, smiled, went back inside. For the first couple months, it was just noise. Contractors coming and going, a dumpster in the driveway, power tools at 7 in the morning. I didn't complain. Man's got a right to fix up his property. Then one morning in May, I walked out to get my mail and noticed something. The fence between our properties, a simple post and wire affair that had been there since before Mrs. Pemberton's time, had been moved. Not a lot. Not enough that most people would notice. But I noticed. Because that's what I did for a living. The posts were new. The wire was new. And the line was about 18 inches closer to my house than it should have been. 18 inches doesn't sound like much. But over the length of that fence, roughly 210 feet, that's about 260 square feet of my land. My land. That Dale Burgess had quietly annexed to widen his driveway approach so he could pour a concrete apron for a detached garage he was building in the back. I walked over and knocked on his door. Polite. Calm. I told him the fence had been moved and I'd appreciate it if he put it back. He looked at me with his half grin, the kind you give a dog that's barking at nothing, and said, "I don't think so, bud." Had my guy survey it. That's where the line is. I asked to see the survey. He said he'd get it to me. He never did. I called the county. Spoke to code enforcement. Spoke to the planning office. Spoke to a woman named Denise who sounded like she was eating lunch the entire time. They told me it was a civil matter. Boundary disputes between neighbors weren't something the county got involved in. I'd need to hire a lawyer. Now, I could have hired a lawyer. I could have filed a quiet title action, paid $8,000, and waited 14 months for a court date. But I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do something more thorough. See, Dale Burgess made an assumption about me. He saw a 71-year-old man living alone in a house with peeling paint and a lawn that needed mowing, and he assumed I was someone who would just absorb the loss. Shrug it off. Let it go. That was a mistake. The first thing I did was pull my own original survey from when I bought the property in 2019. I had the plat, the meaties and bounds description, the iron pins, everything. I went out with my old equipment, my Topcon total station that I'd kept in the garage, and I ran the line myself. I was right, of course. 18¼ inches to be precise. I documented everything. Photos, measurements, GPS coordinates. Dated and time-stamped. Then I started looking at Dale's property. Not the fence line. Everything else. 40 years in surveying teaches you something most people don't understand. Every piece of land has a paper trail, and that paper trail is public record. So I went to the County Register of Deeds. I pulled Dale's deed. I pulled Mrs. Pemberton's deed before his. I pulled the subdivision plat from 1974. I pulled every permit application associated with that parcel going back 20 years. And that's when things got interesting. The detached garage Dale was building, no permit. Not applied for, not issued, not pending. He was building a 600 square foot structure with electrical service and no permit whatsoever. In Greene County, that's a stop work order and a fine. But I didn't report it yet. I kept digging. I pulled the septic records from the health department. Mrs. Pemberton's house had a conventional gravity flow septic system designed for a 2-bedroom home. Dale had converted the house to 3 bedrooms and added a half bath. That's a material change in use that requires a septic evaluation and potentially a new system. He hadn't done any of it. The existing drain field was also according to the original installation permit from 1976. partially located in the area where he was now pouring a concrete driveway apron. You cannot put impervious surface over a septic drain field. That's not a county code issue. That's a state environmental violation. I kept going. I looked at the survey Dale claimed to have had done. I filed a public records request for any surveys recorded on his parcel. There was one filed 3 months prior by a company called Ridgeline Land Services out of Morristown. I pulled it. I compared it to the subdivision plat. And I found something that made me sit back in my chair and whistle. The survey was fraudulent. Not sloppy. Not a mistake. Fraudulent. The bearing on the common line between our properties had been altered by 2 degrees. The distance had been shortened by 11 feet. The iron pin at the southeast corner of Dale's lot, which I physically located with a metal detector and found exactly where the 1,974 plat said it should be, was shown on Ridgeline's survey as being in a location that didn't exist. Someone had deliberately redrawn that line to give Dale an extra strip of my property. I filed a complaint with the Tennessee Board of Examiners for land surveyors. I included my own survey data, the original plat, and a side-by-side comparison. Then I started making phone calls. Not to lawyers. To the county. To code enforcement. To the health department. To the State Department of Environment and Conservation. I filed formal complaints, written, documented with exhibits for the unpermitted garage, the septic violations, the impervious surface over the drain field, and the encroachment based on a fraudulent survey. I didn't file them all at once. I spaced them out over 6 weeks. 1 per week. Each one triggering a separate inspection, a separate file, a separate enforcement action. I also planted a row of leyland cypress trees right along my actual property line, 18¼ inches from Dale's new fence. When he came over and asked what I was doing, I smiled and said landscaping. The county couldn't ignore written complaints with documentary evidence. The inspection started in August. The stop work order on the garage came first. Then the septic violation. Then the environmental referral. Each one carried fines. Each one required remediation. The garage had to come down, the driveway had to be torn up, a new septic system had to be engineered and installed. Dale came to my door in September. He wasn't grinning anymore. His face was red and his voice was shaking, and he called me things I won't repeat. He said I had no idea who I was messing with. He said he'd bury me. I told him to get off my property. All of it. The surveyor from Ridgeline had his license suspended pending investigation. Dale's contractor pulled off the job when the liens started stacking up. By November, Dale had over $47,000 in code enforcement fines, remediation costs, and penalties. He couldn't sell the property with the liens attached. He couldn't refinance. He couldn't finish the flip. In January of this year, the county foreclosed on the liens. Dale Burgess lost the property. The whole thing. Not because of a lawsuit, not because of a judge, because of paperwork. Because every violation was real, every complaint was legitimate, and every single line I drew was exactly where it was supposed to be. The new fence came down in February. My cypress trees are about 4 feet tall now. They'll be 20 in a few years. Carol would have liked them. I still sit on my porch. I still drink my coffee. I still watch the birds. But every now and then I look over at that empty lot next door and I think about Dale Burgess and his too-hard handshake, and I allow myself a small, quiet satisfaction. 40 years drawing lines. And nobody moves mine.
Story 4.
I watched my own words come out of his mouth on a Tuesday morning in March. I was sitting in the back row of Conference Room B on the 7th floor, the one with the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago River, and my manager, Greg Hollister, was standing at the front of the room presenting a 62-slide deck to the executive board. Every slide was mine. Every word. Every data point, every strategic pivot, every campaign framework I'd spent 11 weeks building from scratch while eating cold ramen at my desk past midnight. He didn't even change the font. I remember my hands going numb. I remember the sound of the CFO saying, "Greg, this is brilliant work." I remember Greg smiling, that practiced humble smile he does, and saying, "Well, I can't take all the credit, but I really felt passionate about this direction." He didn't look at me. Not once. My name is Elena Marsh. I'm 31 years old. I've been a data analyst at Kessler & Boone Marketing for 3.5 years. And for most of that time, I thought if I just worked hard enough, kept my head down, and delivered exceptional results, the right people would notice. The right people did notice. They just weren't the people I expected. Let me back up. Greg hired me. That's the part that makes this complicated. He pulled my resume out of a pile of 200 applicants, called me personally, told me he saw something special in my analytical approach. For the first year, I genuinely liked him. He was charming. Mentored me. Bought the team lunch on Fridays. He had this way of making you feel like you were part of something important, like the work mattered, like he saw you. The first time it happened, I almost didn't catch it. I'd written a client retention analysis, nothing flashy, just a deep dive into churn patterns for our biggest account. I sent it to Greg on a Thursday night. The following Monday, I overheard him on a call with the VP of Client Services, walking through my findings as if they'd come from his own brain. He used my exact phrasing. Behavioral decay curve. That was my term. I'd coined it. I told myself it was normal. Managers present their team's work. That's how it works. Right. But then it happened again. And again. A social media pivot strategy I'd developed for a pharmaceutical client. A competitive analysis framework I'd built using a methodology I'd literally invented during my master's thesis. Each time, Greg would ask me to send him my drafts for review. Each time those drafts would reappear in meetings, I wasn't invited to under his name with my fingerprints scrubbed clean. By the second year, I started keeping notes. Not because I had a plan, because I was starting to feel like I was losing my mind. The real escalation came in October when Greg was nominated for the Kessler Award, the firm's annual prize for strategic innovation. The nomination was based on the Meridian campaign. My campaign, the one I'd built from a blank whiteboard over 6 months, running regression analyses at 2 a.m, testing audience segments until my eyes bled. I'd even named it Project Meridian, because I'd been staring at a map of meridian lines when the core insight clicked. Greg won the award. He gave a speech. He thanked his incredible team in that vague, sweeping way that means nobody specific. I sat at table 6 and clapped. I smiled. I drank my wine. And when I got home that night, I sat on my bathroom floor and cried so hard I burst a blood vessel in my left eye. That was the night I started the file. I called it Insurance. A folder on an encrypted external drive. Every original draft with timestamps. Every email I'd sent. Greg, with my work attached. Every calendar invite I'd been excluded from where that work was later presented. I started screenshotting everything as Slack messages asking for my rough thoughts, followed by board presentations the next day using those exact rough thoughts polished and credited to him. Then I discovered something that changed everything. I was digging through old shared drives looking for a template when I found a folder labeled Archive Team Transitions. Inside were exit interview notes for 5 former analysts who'd worked under Greg over the past 4 years. All 5 had chosen to resign. All 5 had glowing performance reviews right up until their final quarter, when suddenly their ratings dropped. Phrases kept repeating across their files: lack of initiative, difficulty collaborating, not a culture fit. the same phrases Greg had started using about me in our last one-on-one. I tracked down 2 of them on LinkedIn. The first, a woman named Priya, didn't respond. The second, a guy named Marcus, called me back within an hour. His voice was shaking. "He did the same thing to you, didn't he?" Marcus said. He told me everything. The stolen work, the gaslighting, the way Greg would praise you in private and erase you in public. Marcus said he'd tried to report it, gone to HR, and within 2 weeks, Greg had put him on a performance improvement plan. Marcus resigned a month later. He said it nearly ended his career. That conversation rewired something in me. This wasn't just about my slides. This was a system. Greg had been feeding on junior analysts for years, consuming their work, spitting out their careers, and climbing the ladder on the bones of people too exhausted or too scared to fight back. I needed someone inside the building who had power and no loyalty to Greg. That's when I thought of Diane Okafor, the CEO's chief of staff. I'd met her once at a company town hall, and she'd asked me a sharp, specific question about data attribution that told me she actually understood what analysts do. More importantly, she reported directly to the CEO and operated completely outside Greg's chain of command. I didn't go to her office. I didn't send a dramatic email. I simply started BCCing her on every original draft I sent to Greg. Every single one. No explanation. Just the raw work timestamp from my company email days or weeks before Greg would present it as his own. I did this for 4 months. Then Greg made his biggest mistake. In February, he pulled me into his office and closed the door. He told me he'd heard I'd been talking to people outside the department about internal work. His voice was calm, but his eyes were different. Hard. He leaned forward and said, "And I will never forget this, Elena, I've built something here. And people who try to disrupt what I've built tend to find that this industry is smaller than they think." I asked him if that was a threat. He smiled and said, "It's advice." I went back to my desk. My hands were shaking. But this time, it wasn't from fear. I opened my email and forwarded his calendar invite for the meeting, the one that would show the closed-door session with no documented agenda, to Diane. Then I typed 3 words in the body of the email: "I'm ready to talk." Diane called me that evening from her personal phone. She told me she'd been watching. She'd received every BCC. She'd already begun cross-referencing my original drafts against Greg's board presentations. The timestamps weren't even close. My work preceded his presentations by days, sometimes weeks. She'd also quietly pulled the personnel files of the 5 former analysts. She'd spoken to Marcus. She'd spoken to Priya, who had finally responded to Diane's outreach, even though she'd ignored mine. The pattern was undeniable. 3 weeks later, Greg was called into a meeting with the CEO, the general counsel, and the head of HR. He walked in, expecting to discuss his upcoming promotion to senior vice president. He did not get promoted. The investigation took 6 weeks. They found that Greg had systematically claimed credit for the original work of at least 7 employees over a 5-year period. They found deleted email threads he thought were gone. IT recovered them from backup servers. They found Slack messages where he'd explicitly told junior analysts not to present their own work because the executives prefer hearing it from leadership. They found the performance improvement plans he'd weaponized against anyone who pushed back. Greg was terminated. Not quietly. Not with a resignation package and a polite LinkedIn post about new opportunities. He was fired for cause. His Kessler Award was rescinded. The CEO issued an internal memo acknowledging that multiple employees had been harmed by a sustained failure of managerial accountability, and announced a new attribution policy requiring all strategic work to be credited to its original authors. I was offered Greg's position. I turned it down. I didn't want his office. I didn't want his title. I wanted something he never gave anyone. I wanted to be credited for my own work and left alone to do it well. They created a new senior analyst role for me instead. corner desk. Direct line to the strategy team. My name on my own slides. Marcus came back to the company 4 months later. Priya didn't. She'd built something better somewhere else, but she sent me an email that said simply, "Thank you for being the one who didn't leave quietly." Here's what I learned. Silence isn't professional. Silence is what people like Greg count on. They build entire careers on the assumption that the people doing the real work will be too polite, too scared, or too tired to say anything. And most of the time, they're right. But not every time. Not this time.
Story 5.
I trusted my daughter with my life. She used that trust to steal everything I had left. My name is Harold Myers. I'm 73 years old. I spent 41 years as a certified public accountant in Kansas City, Missouri. I balanced books for restaurants, dental practices, car dealerships, you name it. Numbers were my language. Precision was my religion. And I'm telling you this so you understand something important. I am not a stupid man. But I was a lonely one. And loneliness, I've learned, is the crack in the foundation that lets the worst people crawl inside. My wife Donna passed in 2019. Pancreatic cancer, fast and cruel. After she died, the house on 87th Street got real quiet. I had 3 kids, Kevin, who lives in Denver, Lisa, who's down in Tulsa, and my youngest, Suzanne. Suzanne lived 20 minutes away in Overland Park. Kevin called once a week. Lisa called twice a month. Suzanne showed up every Sunday with a container of homemade chicken soup and a smile that could break your heart. I want you to remember that smile, because it's the last thing I saw before everything went dark. The diagnosis came in early 2021. Early stage dementia. My doctor, Dr. Pham, sat me down and explained it carefully. I'd have good days and bad days. My cognition would slip in small ways, forgetting where I put my keys, losing track of conversations, repeating myself. But I was still me. Still competent. Still capable of making my own decisions. That distinction matters more than you know, because Suzanne understood it perfectly. She understood that I was foggy enough to be guided, but sharp enough that no court would call me incapacitated. She found the sweet spot, and she lived in it. The Sunday visits became more frequent. Tuesdays. Thursdays. She started organizing my medications into those little plastic pill organizers. She drove me to appointments. She brought over casseroles and sat with me while I watched Jeopardy. I remember thinking, God, at least I have one kid who gives a damn. Kevin and Lisa, I told myself they were busy. They had their own lives. But Suzanne was here. Suzanne cared. That's what I told myself when she first mentioned the attorney. Dad, we should probably update your paperwork, she said one Thursday afternoon, casual as anything. You know your will, your medical stuff. It's been years. Mom's still listed on half of it. She wasn't wrong. Donna was still my healthcare proxy. My existing will was from 2014. So when Suzanne said she'd found a good estate attorney, a guy named Dale Whitford in Lenexa, I didn't think twice. She drove me there on a Wednesday morning. Nice office. Leather chairs. Dale was polite, professional, soft-spoken. He asked me questions. I answered them. Suzanne sat in the corner, quiet hands folded in her lap like she was at church. I signed what he put in front of me. I signed a new living will. I signed a durable power of attorney. I signed a healthcare directive. And I didn't read every word because my eyes get tired and the print was small, and Suzanne said she'd already reviewed everything and it was all standard. Standard. 3 months later, she took me back. There were updates, she said. Some language that needed tightening. I signed again. Then again, 2 months after that. Each time Suzanne drove. Each time Suzanne sat in the corner. Each time Dale Whitford slid papers across the desk. And I signed where the little yellow tabs told me to sign. I didn't know what I was signing. Not really. Not the specifics. And that's the part that keeps me up at night, because I should have known. 41 years of reading fine print for a living, and I let my own daughter hand me a pen and point. Here's what those documents said, as I eventually learned. The first revision removed Kevin and Lisa as co-beneficiaries of my estate and made Suzanne the sole heir. The second revision granted Suzanne full durable power of attorney, financial and legal, effective immediately, not upon incapacitation. The third revision named Suzanne as my exclusive healthcare proxy with authority to make end-of-life decisions, override physician recommendations, and restrict hospital visitation. She could decide who got to see me. She could decide when to pull the plug. She could sell my house, drain my accounts, and lock my other 2 children out of every room I'd ever be in. And it was all technically legal. Because I signed it. Because I wasn't legally incompetent. Because Dale Whitford asked me, "Mr. Myers, do you understand what you're signing?" And I said, "Yes." And maybe in that moment, I thought I did. Kevin found out by accident. He called my financial advisor in March 2022 to ask about my accounts. "Just checking in," he said. And the advisor told him he couldn't share any information because he was no longer an authorized party. Kevin called me confused. I didn't know what he was talking about. He called Lisa. Lisa didn't know either. Then Kevin drove 11 hours from Denver to Kansas City without telling anyone, walked into my house on a Tuesday morning, and found the copies of the documents in my filing cabinet. He sat at my kitchen table and read them out loud to me. Every word. And I sat there listening. And I felt something. I hadn't felt since Donna died. I felt the floor disappear beneath me. "Dad," Kevin said, and his voice was shaking, "did you know Lisa and I aren't in your will anymore?" I didn't. I swear to God I didn't. I remembered signing papers. I remembered Dale's office. I remembered Suzanne telling me it was all standard. But I did not remember agreeing to cut my own children out of my life. Kevin hired a lawyer that same week. A woman named Patricia Okonkwo, out of an office on Metcalf Avenue. Sharp as a scalpel. She filed a petition in Johnson County Probate Court to challenge the validity of the documents alleging undue influence and exploitation of a vulnerable adult. And that's when Suzanne stopped bringing soup. The hearing was held in a conference room on the second floor of the Johnson County Courthouse. Fluorescent lights, drop ceiling, a long table with fake wood grain. It looked like the break room of a mid-tier insurance company, and it was the place where my family came apart. Suzanne sat across from me with her own attorney. She wore a navy cardigan and no makeup. She looked tired. She looked like a devoted daughter who'd been dragged into court by her jealous siblings. That was the play, and she executed it flawlessly. Her attorney argued that I had signed everything voluntarily, that I was assessed as competent at the time, that Dale Whitford had followed proper legal procedure, that Suzanne's increased involvement in my care was natural and appropriate given my diagnosis, that Kevin and Lisa had been largely absent. And here's the thing that made me sick. Some of that was true. Kevin was in Denver. Lisa was in Tulsa. They weren't here every Sunday. They weren't organizing my pills. They weren't driving me to the doctor. Suzanne was. And she'd built that presence deliberately, methodically, like she was constructing an alibi out of casserole dishes and prescription bottles. Patricia called Dr. Pham to testify. He explained my diagnosis. He explained that early-stage dementia creates a window, a period where the patient appears functional, but is highly susceptible to suggestion, particularly from trusted figures. He said, and I'll never forget this, Mr. Myers could tell you what day it was. He could sign his name, but he could not critically evaluate complex legal language or resist the influence of someone he depended on emotionally. Suzanne cried during that testimony. Real tears. I watched them roll down her face and I thought, are those for me? Or are those for the house, the accounts, the control she was about to lose? I'll never know. And that's the wound that won't close. The judge ruled in our favor. Partially. The documents were voided on grounds of undue influence. My original 2014 will was reinstated. A court-appointed guardian ad litem was assigned to oversee any future legal or medical decisions. Dale Whitford faced a bar complaint. Suzanne was not criminally charged, Patricia told me. It almost never gets that far. Undue influence is a civil concept. It lives in the gray. And Suzanne had been very, very careful to stay in the gray. Kevin and Lisa don't speak to Suzanne anymore. I don't either most days. She sent me a letter last Christmas. I opened it, read 2 lines, and put it in the trash. Not because I'm angry. Because I'm afraid. Afraid that if I read the whole thing, I'll feel that warmth again. That Sunday morning feeling of someone showing up. Someone choosing me. And I'll forget what it cost. I still live in the house on 87th Street. Kevin calls every other day now. Lisa flies in once a month. They're trying. But the house is still quiet. And some Sundays around noon, I catch myself listening for a knock at the door. Nobody comes. And I tell myself that's safer. I tell myself the silence is what protection sounds like. But it doesn't sound like anything, really. It just sounds like a man sitting alone in a kitchen wondering how the person who loved him the loudest was the one who meant it the least.
Story 6.
I spent 41 years measuring land for a living. 41 years walking property lines, reading deeds, driving stakes into dirt, and telling people exactly where their world ended and someone else's began. So when I tell you I know where my property line sits, understand that I don't mean it the way most people do. I don't mean I have a general sense. I mean I could walk it blindfolded at midnight and plant a flag within a quarter inch of the iron pin. That's why what Dale Puckett did to me wasn't just theft. It was an insult. I retired in 2019. Bought 23 acres outside Waynesboro, Tennessee, Lawrence County, right where the hills start folding into each other like knuckles. The place had a 1940s farmhouse, a good well, and silence so deep you could hear your own blood moving. My wife Carol had passed 2 years before. I wasn't looking for a fresh start. I was looking for a place to be still. And for about 14 months, that's exactly what I got. Then Dale moved in next door. He bought the adjacent parcel, 30 acres, in March of 2021. At first, I thought he was running a small hobby kennel. A few dogs, some fencing, nothing to lose sleep over. But by summer, the barking was constant. Not a few dogs. Dozens. He was running a commercial breeding operation, French bulldogs from what I could tell, and he was scaling fast. New kennel buildings went up. Gravel pads got poured. Trucks started coming and going at all hours. I didn't love it, but it was his land. I minded my own business. Then one morning in October, I walked my east fence line the way I always did, coffee in hand, just checking things, and I stopped. The fence was wrong. Not dramatically wrong. Not obviously wrong. But wrong in the way that only a man who spent 4 decades measuring the earth would notice. The chain link fence Dale had installed along our shared boundary wasn't where the old post and wire fence had been. It was south, into my property. I eyeballed it at 6 to 8 feet, a strip running nearly 400 linear feet along the line. That's roughly 3,000 square feet of my land, just absorbed into his operation, like it had always been his. He'd even poured a concrete pad for a new kennel building that was sitting partially on my dirt. I walked over that afternoon, knocked on his door, kept it neighborly, told him I thought his fence crew might have made an error, that the line looked off, and I'd be happy to show him the survey markers. Dale leaned against his doorframe, arms crossed, and smiled at me. "Fence is where my guys put it," he said. "If you've got a problem, call the county." So I did. And that's when I learned how things actually work. When you're a 70-year-old man living alone in rural Tennessee, the county code enforcement office told me boundary disputes were civil matters. The zoning office confirmed Dale had pulled permits for agricultural structures, which in Lawrence County covers commercial breeding operations with almost no oversight. The sheriff's office said they couldn't get involved in a property line disagreement without a court order. Everyone was polite. Everyone was sympathetic. And every single one of them told me it was my problem to solve. Dale, meanwhile, had already started running dogs on the stolen strip. He knew exactly what he'd done. He was betting that a retired old man wouldn't have the energy or the money to fight him. He bet wrong. I pulled my original deed and survey from when I purchased the property. I confirmed every pin, every bearing, every distance. Then I hired a licensed surveyor, a younger guy I'd mentored years ago, and had him do a full boundary survey with GPS-corrected coordinates. The result was exactly what I knew it would be. Dale's fence encroached between 7 feet 8 inches and 8 feet 2 inches onto my parcel, along the entire shared boundary. His concrete pad for the new kennel sat 22 inches onto my land. I sent Dale a certified letter with the survey attached, demanding he remove the fence and structures within 30 days. He never responded. So I escalated. I bought a drone. Nothing fancy, a DJI Mini, perfectly legal for recreational use over my own property. I started documenting everything. The encroachment, the number of dogs, the waste runoff that was draining toward my pasture, the trucks coming at 2 and 3 in the morning. I logged dates, times, license plates. I photographed every square foot of that stolen strip from the air, time-stamped and geotagged. I built a file like I was prosecuting a federal case because I knew that when I finally walked into a courtroom, I was only going to get one clean shot. But the drone footage gave me something I hadn't expected. Dale's operation was bigger than what was visible from the road. He had over 60 dogs in various enclosures, many of them in conditions that would make your stomach turn. Stacked crates, standing water, dogs that hadn't seen a veterinarian in God knows how long. I reported it to animal control. They did an inspection, cited him for minor violations, and gave him 60 days to correct. He corrected just enough to pass a follow-up. The system was designed to give people like Dale every possible chance. While I waited for my attorney to file the boundary action, I did something else. Something that changed everything. I went to the Lawrence County Register of Deeds and pulled the complete chain of title for both properties going back to their common origin. My parcel and Dale's had been part of the same farm until 1946, when the original owner subdivided and sold them separately. And in that 1946 deed, the one that created Dale's parcel, there was a restrictive covenant. It was one sentence buried in the legal description, written in the kind of language nobody uses anymore. It said the property was conveyed subject to the condition that it be used solely for residential and traditional agricultural purposes, and that any commercial enterprise conducted on the premises would constitute a violation entitling the grantor or his successors and assigns to pursue all available remedies, including forfeiture. I read that sentence 11 times. Then I called my attorney. Now, deed covenants from the 1940s don't always hold up. Courts have relaxed enforcement of many of them over the decades, especially ones tied to racial restrictions or outdated land use concepts. But this one was different. It was a clear, specific use restriction tied to the character of the land, and Tennessee courts have consistently upheld those when they run with the land, and subsequent buyers have constructive notice, which Dale did because the covenant was recorded in his chain of title. He either didn't read his deed, or he didn't think anyone would ever find it. Either way, it was his problem now. My attorney filed 2 actions simultaneously. The first was a straightforward boundary encroachment suit, seeking removal of the fence and structure's damages for trespass and an injunction. The second was an action to enforce the restrictive covenant seeking to shut down the commercial breeding operation entirely. Dale hired a lawyer out of Columbia. They filed an answer claiming the covenant was abandoned and unenforceable due to changed conditions in the area. The judge didn't buy it. The area hadn't changed. It was still rural, residential, and small-scale agricultural, exactly as it had been in 1946. There were no other commercial operations within a mile. Dale's own real estate listing when he bought the property described it as a quiet rural homestead. His own purchase documents undermined his defense. The court ruled in my favor on both counts. Dale was ordered to remove the encroaching fence and all structures from my property within 45 days. He was ordered to pay damages for the trespass and my survey and legal costs. And the court enforced the restrictive covenant ordering him to cease all commercial breeding operations on the property. That last part is what broke him. His entire investment, the kennel, buildings, the infrastructure, the breeding stock, the business he'd built, was predicated on operating from that location. Without it, he had nothing but 30 acres of land with buildings he couldn't legally use. He tried to appeal. His attorney advised him the chances were slim and the costs would be enormous. Within 3 months, Dale put the property up for sale. But here's the thing about selling land with an active restrictive covenant limiting it to residential and traditional agricultural use, it's not worth what you paid for it. Not even close. He sold at a loss. A significant loss. The new buyers are a young couple who raise goats and keep to themselves. The fence is back where it belongs. The concrete pad is gone. The dogs were rehomed through a rescue organization that got involved after my drone footage made its way to the right people. I sit on my porch now in the evenings and it's quiet again. The kind of quiet Carol would have loved. People ask me if I feel bad about what happened to Dale. If I think I went too far. I measured land for 41 years. I know exactly how far is too far. Dale went 8 feet past it.
Story 7.
I'm sure my husband has told his side of the story, and I'm sure it makes me sound like a monster. The cheating wife. The one who destroyed everything. And I did. I won't deny that. But stories have more than one side, and mine didn't start with a secret text message. It started with silence. Moving back to my hometown was supposed to be a good thing. We'd be closer to family, have more support. But for me, it was the beginning of the end. My husband is a doctor, and he's a brilliant one. He's a good man, a good provider. But he was never really home even when he was sitting right next to me. He'd walk through the door and the stress of his job would walk in with him. It was a physical presence in our house, this cloud of anxiety about work and money that he never ever talked about. He'd just disappear into his phone or his laptop and I would just not exist. My entire life had shrunk. I was the one running the house, raising our kids, managing the schedules, everything. My world was school runs and grocery shopping and a home that felt more like a quiet office where I was the unpaid staff. I loved my children more than anything, but I was disappearing. I was just mom. I was just the doctor's wife. I wasn't a person anymore. I was a set of responsibilities. The loneliness was a physical ache. I started going to therapy by myself. I threw myself into working out. I was trying anything to feel like I was still in my own body. One night, I finally got up the courage to say something. I found him in the living room scrolling on his phone, and my heart was pounding. I asked him if he would go to couples counseling with me. I told him I felt like we were drifting apart. He didn't even really look at me. He just kind of shrugged and said, "I think we're okay. Let's just see how it goes." Okay. He thought we were okay. He had no idea our marriage was already underwater. That was the moment I truly gave up. He couldn't see me. He couldn't see how much pain I was in. After that, I stopped trying to get him to. Then I met our new friends, the other couple. The husband and I were both the primary caregivers during the day while our spouses worked. We started talking. It was that simple. We'd hang out while the kids played. We talked about how exhausting toddlers are, about bad TV shows, about what we wanted to be when we grew up. He actually listened. He would look at me when I spoke, and he'd see the dark circles under my eyes and say, "You look tired," instead of just looking straight through me. He made me laugh. For the first time in years, I felt like a real person. The text started innocently enough, a meme about parenting, a complaint about being nap-trapped, but it quickly turned into more. We started texting all day, every day. It was my secret world, my escape. He was the first person I talked to in the morning and the last one I talked to at night. The I love yous and the pet names just sort of happened. It wasn't planned. It was the language of two people who were starving for connection and had finally found it. It felt safe because it was just words on a screen. Of course, it didn't stay that way. His wife found the messages. The panic I felt was ice cold. When my husband confronted me, I lied. I downplayed it, said it was just a friendship that got a little weird. How could I explain that these messages were the only thing holding me together? How do you explain a hunger to someone who's never missed a meal? I even offered to show him the texts, a bluff, because I knew he wouldn't look. He trusted me, but it didn't feel like trust. It felt like he didn't care enough to even be suspicious. His wife demanded we stop all communication. My husband agreed. It felt like they were trying to take away my air supply. The secrecy that came next wasn't about being sneaky. It felt like a matter of survival. We downloaded a secret messaging app. We started talking on the phone late at night, whispering for hours when the whole house was dark and silent. It was crazy, it was reckless, but it was ours. It was the only thing that was just for me. I sent him pictures of myself, pictures in my underwear, pictures where I tried to look sexy. It sounds so sordid, I know, but it wasn't really about him. It was about me. It was proof that I was still a woman, someone desirable, and not just a tired mom in yoga pants. Each picture was me trying to see myself the way he saw me. The first time we kissed, it felt like something that was always going to happen. The physical affair was just the next logical step. Our hearts and minds had been in this for months. Our bodies were just catching up. Those afternoons at his house, when everyone was gone, were the only time I felt completely whole. The lies I had to tell to get there were horrible. The fake errands, the alibi I created with a girlfriend by taking a picture with her before I left to meet him. I hated that part. I hated the person I had to become to keep this one part of my life where I felt alive. But I was so desperate I was willing to pay the price. I had built this entire second life, this fragile bubble where I was seen and loved. And for a while I managed to keep my two worlds from touching. I thought I could handle it. I thought I had it under control. Then one afternoon I came home from the grocery store. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I put the bags down on the counter and called out for my husband. No answer. I walked through the house and I found him in our little home office. He was sitting in my chair at my desk looking at my laptop. The screen was on. He wasn't typing. He was just staring. He didn't turn around when I walked in, but I knew he'd heard me. The air in the room was thick and heavy and I couldn't breathe. My blood went cold. He knew. After a long, terrible silence, he slowly turned his head and looked at me. There wasn't any anger in his eyes. Not yet. It was just a hollow, shattered look. And in that moment I knew my world, both of them, had just been burned to the ground. "What did you find?" I asked, but my voice was a whisper. The words felt stupid as soon as they left my mouth. It was obvious what he'd found. My secret life was laid bare on that laptop screen. He didn't answer right away. He just swiveled the chair around to face me fully. The hollow look was still there, but now something else was creeping in around the edges. A cold, hard anger that was so much scarier than yelling would have been. "The pictures?" he finally said, his voice flat. I was looking for a tax document and saw a folder with his name on it. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. He gestured to the screen. Why would you do this?" My mind was racing, trying to find the words to explain years of loneliness in a single sentence. "I was lonely," I choked out. "You weren't here. You were never here." It sounded so weak, so pathetic. The classic cheater's excuse. A flicker of pain crossed his face. "I was working," he said, his voice rising just a little. "I was working to pay for this house. For our life. While I was killing myself at the hospital, you were doing this." He didn't need to say more. I knew what he was thinking. The betrayal wasn't just about the sex, it was about everything. And then he delivered the next blow. "His wife called me an hour ago," he said, and my stomach dropped through the floor. "She found your secret messages. The ones from the new app. She sent me the phone logs too, the calls at 4 a.m. The hours and hours on the phone. Do you know how that feels? To know you were whispering to another man while I was asleep in the bed next to you?" I had nothing to say. There was no defense. My secret world wasn't just mine anymore. It was being passed around, examined, judged. So I called him my husband, continued, his voice breaking. I called him and I asked him. And he told me everything. He looked at me, his eyes pleading now. He told me about the afternoons at his house. He told me it happened more than once. Tell me he's lying. Please. But I couldn't. I just stood there frozen as the truth settled into the room and suffocated us both. The affair wasn't a secret anymore. It was just a collection of ugly facts that had destroyed 2 families. The bubble hadn't just popped. It had exploded, and the shrapnel hit everyone. The days that followed were a living nightmare. We were ghosts in our own home, moving around each other, speaking only when we had to about the kids. The silence now was 1,000 times worse than the silence that had started all of this. It was heavy and filled with pain. We tried one session of marriage counseling. It was a disaster. The therapist wanted us to be honest, but honesty felt like a weapon. He wanted to know every detail, every text, every touch. He wanted to understand what I did, but he never asked why. He never tried to understand how we got there. He just saw what I had done, not the years of nothing that came before it. The breaking point came when the therapist suggested radical transparency. He wanted all my passwords, my phone, my email, my social media. My husband latched onto the idea immediately. He saw it as the only way to ever trust me again. I said no. I know how that sounds. It sounds like I was still hiding something. But I wasn't. It was all out in the open. For me, it was about something else. My entire life had been for him, for the kids, for the house. My phone, my private messages with my friends, my thoughts, that was the last little corner of the world that was just mine. Handing over the passwords felt like letting him colonize the last inch of my soul. It felt like agreeing to be a prisoner, to have my every thought monitored. I had already lost myself once in our marriage. I refused to do it again. My refusal was the final nail in the coffin. For him, it was proof I couldn't be trusted. For me, it was the first time I chose myself. The decision to separate was mutual, but it felt like a verdict he handed down to me. The day he helped me pack my things was surreal. I'd be folding a sweater and he'd be taping up a box, the silence between us filled with 5 years of memories. I saw our wedding photo on the mantelpiece, the one where we're both laughing young and so sure about forever. I didn't recognize either of us. I cried then. Not for the marriage we had at the end, but for the one we were supposed to have, the one that got lost somewhere between his job and my loneliness. I never wanted this. I never wanted to hurt him, or our kids, or another family. I just wanted to feel alive. Now I have my own place. It's small and it's quiet. Sometimes the quiet is good. It's peaceful, other times it's just lonely. But it's a different kind of loneliness. This is the loneliness of starting over, not the loneliness of being invisible next to the person who is supposed to see you better than anyone else. I have the kids half the time. Seeing their little faces, knowing I blew up their world for my own selfish needs, is a pain I'll carry with me forever. That's the part that I can never justify. They didn't deserve any of this. I'm in therapy, just me, trying to figure out who I am when I'm not a wife or a mom or an object of someone's desire. I'm trying to learn how to feel whole, all on my own. It's hard. Some days I feel like I'm drowning in regret. But for the first time in a very long time, I feel like I can breathe. This new life is scary and uncertain, but it's mine. Every broken, messy piece of it is mine.
Story 8.
I'm sure my ex-husband painted a pretty clear picture of me. I'm the monster. The cheating wife who blew up our perfect life for nothing. And from his side of the street, he's not wrong. I did a terrible thing. But the story isn't just about the bomb. It's about the years of pressure building up before the explosion. We were that times couple in high school, the quarterback and the head cheerleader, a walking, talking cliché. We started dating when we were 16, and from that moment on, we were never just me and him. We were us. Everyone loved us. Our parents, our friends, our teachers. They saw our future mapped out like a perfect Hallmark movie marriage, a little house with a dog, a couple of kids. And we followed the script because we didn't know there was any other way to live. We got married a year after graduation. I was 19 years old. I'd never been on a date with anyone else. I'd never even kissed anyone else. My entire life had been a straight line from my parents' house to his. I did love him. I need to be clear about that. He was my best friend, my whole world, but he was also my whole world. I didn't have a corner of it that was just for me. I was Mark's wife before I was ever really myself. My dreams got folded into his dreams. We wanted a house, so I worked as a receptionist to help save. He wanted to start his own business, so I learned bookkeeping. My identity was a support role in the movie of his life. And for a few years, it was enough. But then a quiet, creeping feeling started to settle in. It felt like waking up in a room where the walls are slowly moving in. I'd look in the mirror and not recognize the woman staring back. Who was she? What did she like? What did she want? If you took Mark out of the equation, I had no idea. The silence in our perfect little house started to feel deafening. The pressure to keep being the happy, perfect wife was crushing me. Then I met someone at work. He was a sales rep from another company. He'd come in, make a few jokes, and talk to me. Not to Mark's wife, but to me. He asked about my day, my thoughts on a movie, what music I liked. Tiny, insignificant things that felt like a lifeline. It wasn't about love, not really. It was about being seen. He saw a woman, not a wife. And that attention was a drug. It was the first thing in my adult life that felt like it was mine and mine alone. A stupid, selfish, secret thing that I owned. It was a mistake, a catastrophic one, but it was the first real choice I ever made for myself. And of course, it all came crashing down. Mark's boss let everyone go home early one afternoon because of a plumbing issue at their office. I heard the garage door open and my blood turned to ice. There was no time to fix anything, to hide anything. He walked into our bedroom and just stopped. The world didn't explode. It just went completely silent. The look on his face wasn't just anger. It was a shattering confusion, like I had just stabbed him in the heart, and he couldn't understand why the person who was supposed to love him most would do that. I'll never forget that look. I deserved it. I deserved all the screaming and yelling that followed. We tried to fix it. We went to counseling for months. But it never felt like we were healing. It felt like I was on probation. Every week the therapist would ask how I was working to rebuild trust. I had to be the perfect sorry wife. I cooked his favorite meals. I wore the dresses he liked. I agreed with everything he said. I was so terrified of losing the only life I'd ever known that I basically erased myself to make him feel safe. But the guilt and the pressure were 1,000 times worse than before. I was suffocating in the role of the penitent wife. I needed an escape. I started talking to an old friend from high school online, just messaging back and forth. He'd moved out of state years ago. It was innocent at first, just catching up, but it became an outlet. I could complain about the counseling, about how heavy the air in my own house felt. He didn't judge me. He just listened. It was a stupid, reckless thing to do, to have secrets again, when a secret was what broke us in the first place. But I couldn't stop. I needed that one tiny space where I wasn't the villain. The messages were on our shared desktop computer. I used it more, so I usually just stayed logged into my social media account. I'm not a complete idiot. I knew it was a risk. In the last few weeks, things had gotten colder between Mark and me. The fake politeness was gone, replaced by a quiet, heavy tension. We were living like roommates who hated each other. He started using the computer in the evenings, staying up late after I went to bed. He said he was looking at new tools for his business, but he would click the screen off fast whenever I walked into the room. A knot of pure dread started twisting in my stomach. Then one night I went to get a glass of water and saw him sitting there in the dark, the screen glowing on his face. He didn't hear me come in. I saw my profile picture on the screen, the little chat window open. He was just scrolling up and up and up, reading everything. Every complaint, every private joke, every word I had said when I thought no one was looking. He didn't make a sound. He just sat there, bathed in the blue light of my betrayal, his shoulders perfectly still. He knew. I just backed away slowly and went back to bed. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. The next few days were the quietest, loudest days of my life. We didn't talk about it. We didn't talk about anything. We moved around each other in our small house like ghosts, the air thick with everything we weren't saying. I kept waiting for the explosion, for the screaming match, for him to throw a plate against the wall. But nothing happened. The silence was his weapon now, and it was cutting me to pieces. He was making me wait, letting me drown in my own guilt. That Sunday morning, I woke up and he was already dressed. Not in his usual lazy Sunday clothes, but in jeans and hiking boots. The dogs were bouncing around his feet, excited. He grabbed their leashes from the hook by the door. "I'm taking the dogs for a hike," he said, not looking at me. His voice was completely hollow. Empty. There was nothing in it, no anger, no sadness, just a flat, dead sound. I knew right then in my gut. This wasn't about a hike. My whole body went cold. I wanted to scream, to beg, to ask him where he was really going, but the words were stuck in my throat. I just stood there in the hallway watching him clip the leashes onto their collars. He opened the door, the dogs trotted out, and then he was gone. The door clicked shut. I didn't move until I heard his truck start and drive away. The second the sound of his engine faded, I fell apart. A full-on, can't-breathe panic attack. It was finally over. He had left me. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial. I called my friend, the one I'd been messaging. He answered, and all I could do was sob into the phone. "He's gone," I choked out. "Mark's gone. He took the dogs and he's not coming back." He tried to calm me down, but I was hysterical. I was alone in this silent, empty house, and I was terrified. He lived about 30 minutes away and said he was coming over to make sure I was okay. That's who the neighbor saw. The male visitor. It wasn't a secret lover coming for a celebration. It was my friend walking into the middle of my world collapsing. He sat with me while I cried for an hour, made me a cup of tea I didn't drink, and then he left. The timing was damning, I know that. But the truth is, I was already alone. Mark didn't come back that night. The dog's water bowl was still full. His side of the bed was cold and empty. I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling, and the panic slowly started to curdle. By the next morning, it wasn't fear anymore. It was pure, venomous rage. How dare he, after everything, after the counseling, after I groveled and begged and tried to piece us back together, he didn't even have the decency to break up with me to my face. He didn't fight, he didn't yell. He just vanished. He erased me. It felt like the ultimate judgment. It was him saying, "You are so worthless, you're not even worth a proper goodbye." He had taken away my home, my life, my identity as his wife, and now he was taking away my right to even be part of the ending. I snapped. I wanted to hurt him. I wanted him to feel 1 ounce of the crushing humiliation that I was feeling. I wanted to prove to him, and maybe to myself, that I wasn't just some pathetic little thing he could throw away. I was desirable. I was still a person. So I did the ugliest thing I've ever done. I went out, I sent him those texts, I took photos. It was a scorched earth campaign fueled by vodka and shame. Every text was a scream. Asterisk, you didn't break me. See, I don't need you. Someone else wants me. Asterisk. It was a lie. I was completely broken. But I would rather he think I was a monster than a victim. The next few years are a blur of bad decisions. I moved out of the house. We got divorced through lawyers. I never saw him in person again. I threw myself into a life I thought was freedom, but it was just chaos. I was trying so hard to be the opposite of the perfect little wife I had been that I didn't know who I was at all. The anger faded, and what was left was this deep, aching regret that settled into my bones. Years later, I was scrolling through Facebook and saw a picture his mom had posted. It was Mark at a family barbecue. He had his arm around a woman and he was smiling. A real smile, the kind that crinkled the corners of his eyes. The kind I hadn't seen in forever. He looked happy. Genuinely, truly happy. The old hatred I'd been holding on to was just gone. All I felt was this profound sadness for the boy I had loved and the man I had hurt so badly. On impulse, I sent him a message. I just said I knew it was out of the blue, but I was wondering if he'd ever be willing to meet for coffee. I told him I understood if the answer was no. I fully expected him to ignore it or tell me to go to hell. A day later, he replied, "Okay." We met at a Starbucks halfway between our towns. Seeing him walk in was surreal. He looked older, calmer. The anger was gone from his eyes. It was incredibly awkward at first. We talked about a lot of nothing work, the weather. Then I just took a deep breath and stopped the small talk. "Mark, I'm sorry," I said. "I didn't ask you here to make excuses. There are no excuses for what I did. I was immature and selfish, and I felt lost. I blew up our lives because I was too much of a coward to figure out who I was. You didn't deserve any of it. I laid it all out. The suffocation, the desperate search for an identity, the horrible, ugly way I lashed out at the end. I didn't try to make myself look better. I owed him the unvarnished truth. He just listened. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then I saw his eyes fill with tears. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick. I just I never understood why. We talked for another hour. He told me about his new wife, how they met. He told me he'd found his person. And I wasn't jealous. I was happy for him. Before we left, we gave each other an awkward hug. It felt like a decade of poison was being drawn out of me. He had moved on. He was happy. And in that moment, by finally taking responsibility for the monster I had been, I felt like I could finally start to find myself too.
Story 9.
I know what you probably think of me. You've heard his side of the story, so I'm the monster. I'm the cheating, manipulative sociopath who blew up his life. And yeah, I did a terrible thing. I'm not going to pretend I didn't. But you're only seeing the final frame of a 2-year-long movie, and you have no idea how I got there. I moved in with him and his family when I was 18. After a huge fight with my dad, I basically had a garbage bag full of clothes and nowhere to go. My boyfriend, let's call him Alex, said I could stay with him. His mom was amazing at first. She made me feel so welcome, like part of the family. It felt like I was being rescued. But you can only be a guest in someone else's house for so long before you start to feel like a ghost. After a few months, the rescue started to feel like a cage. It was their food I was eating, their water I was using, their roof over my head. Every kind thing they did for me felt like another bar on the window. I wasn't their daughter. I was their son's live-in charity project. I had no privacy, no space that was truly mine, and no say in anything. I was grateful, of course, but I was also suffocating under the weight of that gratitude. And then there was Alex. When we were younger, like 16, and he told me he was the jealous type, I thought it was romantic. It sounded like he cared so much he couldn't stand the thought of anyone else looking at me. By the time I was 20 and living in his house, it wasn't romantic anymore. It was a full-time job managing his insecurities. He'd check my phone when he thought I was asleep. He'd ask who I was texting, why I was smiling at my screen, why I wore a certain outfit to my part-time job. I was constantly being watched, constantly on trial for crimes I hadn't even thought about committing. The night everything really started to break was during a game of Codenames. His sister and her boyfriend, let's call him Mark, were over. It was a normal game night. Mark and I were on a team, and we were actually doing pretty well. We were laughing, high-fiving, just having fun. For the first time in months, I felt like a normal person, not Alex's sad girlfriend who lived in his parents' basement. I felt light. That feeling lasted until we went to bed. The second the door was closed, the interrogation started. You and Mark seemed to be having a lot of fun tonight. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. He asked why I was laughing so hard at his jokes, why I kept looking at him. He made me feel disgusting for just enjoying a board game. My laughter was evidence. My smile was a confession. I tried to defend myself, but it was pointless. In his mind, I had already done something wrong. After that night, a new rule was added to my prison. I had to be careful around Mark. So I was. I became terrified to even make eye contact with the guy. If he was in the kitchen, I'd wait until he left. If he was talking to me, I'd give one-word answers and walk away. I thought that would make Alex happy, that it would prove my loyalty. I was wrong. A week later, Alex cornered me again. Why are you being so awkward around Mark? It's making everyone uncomfortable. It looks suspicious. Do you see, there was no way to win. If I was friendly, I was a flirt. If I was distant, I was hiding something. I was trapped. I wasn't a person to him anymore. I was a problem he had to manage, a possession he had to guard, all while I was living under his family's roof, eating their food and following his rules. Mark was the only person in that entire house who didn't look at me with either pity or suspicion. He just saw me. He'd ask how my day was and actually listen to the answer. He never made me feel like I owed him anything. We never talked about it, but I think he felt a little trapped too, always having to be the perfect boyfriend for Alex's sister. There was this unspoken understanding between us. A shared feeling of being outsiders in a family that wasn't ours. The tension just kept building. Then came the day in the kitchen. I was getting a glass of water and Mark was walking through to the back door. We were alone for maybe 10 seconds. He said something stupid, I don't even remember what, and as he walked past me, he gave me a quick light slap on the ass. It wasn't aggressive or sexual. It was a dumb, impulsive, cross-the-line joke between two people who were going a little crazy from the pressure. It was a mistake, a huge one, but it wasn't malicious. I didn't even have time to process it before Alex was standing in the doorway. He hadn't even been in the room. He'd seen it. He told me he saw the whole thing in the reflection of the glass on the back door. A times reflection asterisk. He wasn't just walking by. He was watching me, spying on me through a reflection, like some kind of creep. His voice was this low, angry hiss. He wasn't just hurt. He was furious that his property had been touched. That's when I snapped. The argument was huge. He was yelling about betrayal and I was screaming about being watched every second of every day. I told him I couldn't live like this anymore, that I was leaving. For a second I really meant it. I saw my chance to finally get out. But as the words left my mouth, the reality hit me. Where would I go? I had no money saved up and my relationship with my dad was still a mess. I had nowhere. My threat was completely empty and we both knew it. His anger disappeared in an instant, replaced by panic. He started apologizing, begging me not to go. He swore he'd changed, that he was just scared of losing me. It wasn't a real apology. It was the sound of a warden convincing a prisoner that her cell was actually for her own good. And like a coward, I let him convince me. I agreed to stay. But in my head, I was already gone. I just hadn't figured out how to unlock the door yet. The house felt colder after that. We were sleeping in the same bed, but might as well have been on different planets. A few nights later, I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing, replaying every mistake, every argument. The walls felt like they were closing in. Around 3 a.m., I gave up and went to the kitchen for some water, just needing to get out of that room. And he was there. Mark. Sitting on the couch in the dark, staring at his phone. He couldn't sleep either. We talked for a few minutes, just quiet, tired whispers. It was nothing really. But it was the first real human conversation I'd had in weeks. And in a moment of total absolute desperation, I did something incredibly stupid. I went over to him and I sat on his lap, burying my face in his shoulder. It wasn't about him. It was about needing to feel safe for 5 seconds, and he was the only person who felt less like a guard and more like a fellow prisoner. It was a foolish, reckless search for a little bit of comfort in a house that had none left for me. After a minute, I got up, mumbled goodnight, and went back to my room, back to the cold side of the bed next to Alex. I closed my eyes, a sick feeling of dread and relief washing over me, and finally fell into a restless sleep. The next morning felt like a hangover, even though I hadn't had a drop to drink. My sleep had been deep but not restful, the kind where you wake up feeling like you've been running a marathon. For a few seconds, everything was normal. The light was filtering through the blinds, Alex was breathing softly beside me, and the world was quiet. Then the memory of the night before crashed down on me. The kitchen. Mark. My stomach twisted into a knot. I was trying to slip out of bed without waking Alex when his voice, cold and flat, cut through the silence. "Don't bother." My heart stopped. I turned over slowly. He wasn't looking at me. He was sitting up, his back against the headboard, and his laptop was open on his lap. He swiveled it to face me. "What is this?" he asked. His voice had no emotion in it at all, which was somehow scarier than if he'd been screaming. On the screen was a grainy black and white video. It was a view of the living room and kitchen from an odd angle up near the ceiling. I saw myself walk into the frame. I saw Mark on the couch. I saw us talking. And then I watched myself, like an out-of-body experience, cross the room and sit on his lap. The timestamp in the corner read 3:15 a.m. It took me a second to process what I was seeing. Not the act itself, but the fact that I was seeing it at all. You filmed me," I whispered. The betrayal of what I'd done was instantly swallowed by the ice-cold shock of how he'd found out. A camera. A hidden camera. In the home I lived in, my paranoia wasn't in my head. He really was times watching me. He finally looked at me and his eyes were completely dead. The blueprint was right. There was no heartbreak there. No sadness. There was just victory. The smug satisfaction of a detective who'd finally cracked the case. He had his evidence. He had proof that all his suspicion, all his jealousy, all his control had been justified all along. He was right about me. "I had a feeling," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "After the kitchen thing, I knew I couldn't trust you." The argument that followed wasn't really an argument. It was a firing squad, and I was tied to the post. He called me every name you can imagine. A liar, a whore, a snake. But the one that stuck, the one he kept repeating, was sociopath. He said I had no feelings, that I had manipulated him and his family, that I was incapable of love. He stood over me, the laptop screen still glowing like he was a prosecutor presenting his final damning piece of evidence to a jury. And I just sat there. I didn't cry. I didn't scream back. All I could feel was this strange hollow buzzing in my ears. The game was over. I had lost spectacularly, but the crushing weight of having to play it every single day was suddenly gone. He hadn't wanted to fix us after the slap in the kitchen. He'd wanted to times me. All his begging and apologizing had been a lie to keep me in the house in his trap until I made a mistake he could record. "Get your stuff," he said finally, his voice shaking with a rage he could barely contain. "I want you out of my house, now." A strange sense of calm washed over me. I stood up and pulled out the garbage bags I'd first moved in with 2 years ago. As I started mechanically pulling my clothes out of the dresser, the words just started spilling out of me. It wasn't for him. He was already scrolling through his phone, probably planning how he would tell his family how he would be the perfect victim. The apology was for me. It was a long, rambling confession to the empty room. I apologized for being too weak to just leave. I apologized for letting myself get so lost that I thought hurting him was the only way to escape. I apologize for using Mark's small kindness as a weapon and a crutch. I apologize for wasting 2 years of my life in his living a lie because I was too scared to be on my own. I was talking to myself, trying to make sense of the absolute mess I had become. He just grunted. Save it. I don't want to hear your psychobabble. He was right. It didn't matter. I had packed my whole life into 3 black trash bags. I stood there looking at the room that had been my prison cell, and the final humiliation hit me. I had nowhere to go. There was only one option, one phone call I had been dreading for 2 years. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely dial the number. He answered on the second ring. Dad. My voice cracked. I hadn't called him Dad in 2 years. There was a pause. Stacy. And then I broke. The sobs I'd been holding back all morning came out in a huge, ugly wave. I couldn't even form sentences. I just cried and choked out words like, made a mistake, need help, and can I come home? He didn't ask questions. He didn't say, I told you so. He just said, I'm on my way. Send me the address. An hour later, my dad's truck pulled up. Seeing him walk to the door was the most shameful and relieving moment of my life. Alex met him at the door, and I could hear their muffled, tense conversation. I imagine Alex showed him the video. I imagine he told him what a sociopath his daughter was. I don't care. My dad just walked into the room, looked at me, looked at my trash bags, and said, Let's go. The car ride was silent. We drove for 20 minutes before he finally spoke. You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, he said, not looking at me. But your room is still your room. It's a mess, but it's there. And I cried again. Not because I was sad about Alex, but because for the first time in 2 years, someone had offered me something with no strings attached. A room. Just a room. My own space. I know what Alex tells people. He has the video. He has the perfect story of betrayal. He'll always be the good guy, and I'll always be the monster who broke his heart. And maybe I am a monster. But he's not the hero he thinks he is. A hero doesn't set traps. A hero doesn't need surveillance footage to feel secure. He thinks he uncovered some dark, twisted plot, but he didn't. All he did was film a girl who was too scared and too weak to walk out the front door. A girl who chose to light a match and burn her own life down because it was the only way she could finally see a way out. I'm not proud of it. But I'm out. And for the first time in a long time, I don't have to worry about who's watching.
Story Teen.
I need to tell my side of the story because what they did to us wasn't just unfair, it was cruel. My husband and I aren't troublemakers. We're the kind of people who follow the rules. We pay our bills on time, we're quiet, and we expect the same from others. That's why we chose this apartment building. It wasn't cheap, not by a long shot. We paid for the amenities, sure, but mostly we paid for the promise of a certain kind of life. A peaceful one. Secure. We were paying for a community where people understood basic respect. For the first year, it was exactly that. It was perfect. Then the new neighbors moved in upstairs. The first thing I noticed was the smell. It would hit me the second I walked in the door after work. A heavy, greasy odor that I couldn't even name. It wasn't the smell of someone cooking dinner. It was constant, seeping through the vents and clinging to our furniture. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night and the smell would be so strong it made me feel sick. It was in our clothes, in our hair. It was an invasion. Then the noise started. It wasn't the occasional dropped object or the sound of a TV. It was a rhythmic, deliberate stomping, like someone was wearing heavy boots and just pacing back and forth for hours on end. At first, we tried to be patient. We'd wait it out, hoping it would stop. But it never did. It would go on late into the night, right above our bedroom. So we did what you're supposed to do. We called security. The first few times a young guy would come up. He'd stand outside their door for maybe 30 seconds, then come down and tell us he couldn't hear anything. He'd write in his little notebook, "No noise detected," and leave. It was infuriating. They made us feel like we were crazy, like we were imagining it. But the moment his car left the parking lot, the stomping would start again. It got worse. They had a dog and they let it use their balcony as a toilet. We started seeing yellow streaks running down the edge of their concrete slab, dripping onto the railing of our own balcony. It was disgusting. We couldn't even sit outside and enjoy a cup of coffee. We took pictures. We called security again. They sent someone up who looked at it, shrugged, and said there was no evidence of an animal. I showed him the picture on my phone, and he just said he couldn't do anything without seeing it happen. Every time we complained, we were met with that same tired, indifferent attitude. It became obvious that security didn't care about solving the problem. They just wanted us to stop calling. We were the inconvenience, not the constant noise or the disgusting smells. We were the ones creating paperwork. We were paying thousands of dollars a month to live in a place where our right to a quiet home meant absolutely nothing. We felt completely helpless. You can only be pushed so far. You can only be ignored and dismissed for so long before you start to feel like you're being targeted. We knew they weren't finding any evidence because they weren't even looking for it. They'd show up, do the bare minimum, and file a report that made us look like liars. So my husband and I decided if they wanted a paper trail, we would give them one. We had to build a case so big, so detailed, that even the laziest security guard couldn't ignore it. We started calling for everything. The moment the music got too loud, we called. The second that awful cooking smell filled our apartment, we called. Every time the stomping started, we called. It was exhausting. It felt like a full-time job documenting every single little thing they did. But we had no other choice. It felt like they knew they were getting to us, too. The noise became more frequent, the smells more potent. It was like they were doing it on purpose, daring us to complain. Over the next 2 weeks, we must have called 18 times. Sometimes twice in one night. The security guards started to recognize my voice. I tried to give them context. "It's the Asian couple upstairs again," I'd say, not to be mean, but to explain. I thought maybe there was a cultural misunderstanding. Maybe where they come from, it's normal to make that much noise, or cook with such strong spices at all hours. I was just trying to help them understand the situation. In America, we try to be considerate of the people living around us. It wasn't a judgment. It was just an observation. Of course, that's not how they saw it. Then we got the notice on our door. An eviction notice. My heart sank. It was retaliation. We were being kicked out of our own home for complaining too much. They were punishing the victims. I was shaking with anger. We immediately requested a meeting with the property manager. We were going to fight this. The meeting was a joke from the second we walked in. It wasn't in the manager's bright, friendly office. It was in a small, windowless room in the back. And sitting at the table next to the property manager was the head of security, the supervisor. He was a big guy, and he had this smug look on his face like he'd already won. And he was armed. He had a pistol and a holster on his hip. For a meeting about noise complaints. I felt a knot of pure fear tighten in my stomach. This wasn't a discussion, it was an intimidation. He had a thick file folder in front of him. He opened it and started reading through every single one of our 18 complaints, one by one. He'd read my report of the noise, then look up at me. "And you told the responding officer that the tenants were Asian, is that correct?" he'd ask after each one. His voice was calm and steady, but his eyes were cold. He was building a trap, twisting my words to make me sound like some kind of monster. He was painting me as a racist, when all I ever wanted was a little peace and quiet. After he went through all the reports, he stacked them neatly back into the folder. He leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. The smug look was back. "Thank you for confirming those details," he said slowly. "Now, regarding these 18 complaints you made over the past 2 weeks?" He paused, letting the silence hang in the air. "There's something you should know about your neighbors." He looked from me to my husband, then back to me. "Your neighbors, Mr. and Mrs. Chen, boarded a flight to Shanghai 3 weeks ago. They haven't been in the country for this entire 2-week period you've been filing these complaints." The air in the room went thin. I think I laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, completely involuntary. "What? That's not possible. That's a lie." "It's not," the supervisor said. He slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a printout of a flight itinerary. 2 names, a confirmation number, and dates that covered the exact period we'd been calling. We have also verified their entry and exit stamps with their building access records. Their key fobs haven't been used once in 19 days. I stared at the paper, but the words swam in front of my eyes. It didn't make any sense. We heard them. We heard the stomping, the music. I smelled the cooking. My husband and I looked at each other, and I could see the same confusion and panic on his face. This was a trick. An elaborate, cruel trick. "So who was in that apartment?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "Because someone was there. We're not crazy. We heard them every single night." The supervisor just looked at me with those dead eyes. No one was in the apartment. It has been empty. "Then you're lying." I slammed my hand on the table and the sound echoed in the tiny room. The supervisor didn't even flinch. "This is a setup. You, them, the management. You all cooked this up to get rid of us because we dared to complain." I turned to the property manager, hoping to see a crack in her composure, a shred of sympathy. There was nothing. She was a stone wall. "You're going to let him do this," I pleaded. "You're going to take the side of tenants who aren't even here over us, over the people who pay their rent on time and follow the rules." She finally spoke, her voice as cold and sterile as the room. "The evidence is clear. You have filed 18 false reports against your neighbors. This constitutes harassment." The word harassment hit me like a physical blow. We were the ones being harassed. For weeks, the smells, the noise, the dog urine, we were living in a nightmare. And now times were the bad guys. It all clicked into place then. The lazy security guards who never found anything. The indifferent manager. The perfectly timed vacation. They had been planning this. They had us cornered. I see what this is, I said, my voice dripping with a bitter realization. You're siding with them because they're immigrants. You're choosing them over hardworking Americans who just want a decent place to live. A small, thin smile touched the property manager's lips. It didn't reach her eyes. Ma'am, she said, her voice dangerously quiet. I am an immigrant. Of course. It all made perfect sense. She was one of them. They were all protecting each other. They closed ranks and we were on the outside. We never stood a chance. We were outsiders in our own home, in our own country. The supervisor slid another piece of paper across the table. It was the eviction notice. Formal. Final. You have 30 days to vacate the premises, he said, as if he were telling me the time. My husband tried to argue, to reason with them, but it was like talking to a brick wall. They had their story, and they were sticking to it. They had their proof. What did we have? Just our word. And our word apparently meant nothing. The meeting was over. They stood up. We were dismissed. Walking out of that office was the most humiliating experience of my life. The smug look on the supervisor's face as we left is burned into my memory. He had won. He had protected the building's reputation by destroying ours. The next 30 days were a blur of boxes, tape, and a suffocating sense of injustice. Every night the silence from the apartment upstairs felt louder than the noises we used to hear. It was a mocking silence. They were gone, and soon we would be too. We had to break our lease, pay a massive penalty, and scramble to find a new place to live with an eviction on our record. It was a financial and emotional. My husband thinks maybe we were hearing things from another apartment, that the sounds were traveling in a weird way. But I know what I heard. And I know what I smelled. I lie awake at night now in our new, much smaller apartment, and I go over it and over it in my head. How could they have been gone? It's impossible. The only thing that makes any sense is that they had someone else staying there. A relative, a friend, someone who wasn't on the lease. And when we started complaining, the management found out and concocted this whole story to cover it up. They had to get rid of us because we were the only ones who knew the truth. They couldn't evict the other couple because it would mean admitting they didn't properly screen their tenants. So they sacrificed us instead. They called us harassers. They called us racists. They threw us out of our home. All because we asked for a little peace and quiet. All because we expected them to do their jobs. They took our money, they took our peace of mind, and then they took our home. And the worst part, they got away with it. They all just got away with it.
Story 11.
My name is Fredo. I'm the kitchen manager, but that title doesn't mean anything. It's just what corporate puts on my paycheck. What I really am is the guy who makes this whole place run. General managers, they're a joke. They come and change the menu font, talk about synergy, and then they're gone in a year. I've been in this kitchen for 15 years. I've seen 6 of them come and go. I'm the constant. I'm the foundation. This isn't just a job for me. It's my life. The people in my kitchen, they're my family. I know their kids' names. I know when their rent is due. I know who they're sending money home to. These are good people, hard workers. A lot of them can't get a job anywhere else. Corporate wouldn't give them the time of day because they don't have the right pieces of paper. I don't care about paper. I care about loyalty. I give them a chance, a steady job, and in return my kitchen runs like a machine. We're fast, we're clean, and we make money. If I have to bend a few rules to make that happen, so what? The world is a tough place. I bring order to my little corner of it. Then Atlas Black showed up. He started as a server, one of those kids with too much energy who thinks he's smarter than everyone else. He was always asking questions, trying to learn every station, sticking his nose where it didn't belong. Eventually, he landed in the carryout department. Carryout is basically a parasite that lives on the kitchen. Their success is my success. If my kitchen is slow, they get complaints. So he was in my world now. He started calling himself the unofficial supervisor. He organized the other carryout kids, mostly teenagers and college students, and started acting like he was their union boss. He was always complaining. They needed more hours. They needed more people on the schedule. They needed a bigger cut of the tip pool. He didn't get it. He saw everything in black and white like it was a textbook. More hours for them meant higher labor costs for me. Higher labor costs meant I couldn't keep as many of my guys on the payroll. He was poisoning my people with ideas that sound good on paper but destroy you in reality. He was a populist and he was starting to become a real problem. The new GM Harvey was a mess, but he wasn't an idiot. He cared about 2 things, money and women, and he saw that I made him a lot of the first one. So he mostly left me and my kitchen alone. But even he could hear the noise Atlas was making. We decided to hold a department meeting. The plan was to let the carryout kids vent, tell them we heard them, and then change nothing. It usually works. But Atlas had planned a coup. He had his little followers stand up one by one and complain about how I was cutting hours to save money. Of course I was. That's my job. Then the final move. One of them said, "We think Atlas should be the new manager. He knows what we need." They all nodded. I looked at Harvey. He looked at me. It wasn't an angry look. It was a look of understanding. This wasn't just a kid complaining anymore. This was a mutiny. Atlas had made his move, and now he was a direct threat to both of us. He had to go. It didn't take long. A few weeks later, I walked out of my office to do my nightly check. And there he was. Sitting in a booth, not even clocked in for his shift, yet stuffing his face with an order of our calamari fritti. It's one of our most expensive appetizers. There was no ticket on the table. I knew exactly what had happened. He'd gone back to the line, probably flashed a smile at one of the new nervous line cooks, and bullied him into making it for free. It was the exact kind of entitled rules don't apply to me crap he'd been preaching for months. I went and got Harvey. We walked over to the table together. He looked up, chewing without a hint of shame. "What's this Atlas?" Harvey asked. He tried to spin some story about it being a canceled order that was going to be thrown out. A complete lie. A canceled order goes in the trash. It doesn't get delivered to your personal booth 10 minutes before your shift. It was perfect. It was clean. He broke one of the biggest rules in the book, you don't steal. We took him to the office and fired him on the spot. It wasn't a setup. He just finally got caught being the person he always was. The next day, the relief in the restaurant was huge. It was like we had cut out a tumor. When Atlas showed up in the middle of the dinner, rushed to collect his last paycheck and tips, I almost had to respect the nerve. I walked out, shook his hand, and told him no hard feelings. That's just business. You play the game, you take your risks. He took a risk and he lost. I never imagined that when I was shaking his hand, he had his phone in his pocket recording everything. A week later, a woman named Audrey showed up. She was from corporate, an auditor. She sat down with me and Harvey and played the recording. It was nothing. Just the last 30 seconds of our conversation in Harvey's office right after we fired Atlas. Harvey was saying something like, "Thank God that's over. I couldn't take another day of that kid," and I laughed and agreed. It was just two managers glad to be rid of a headache. But to a corporate suit like Audrey, it sounded bad. She saw conspiracy. To protect ourselves, Harvey and I had to be a team. But the pressure started to crack him. Audrey put him on a performance improvement plan, which is just corporate speak for you are about to be fired. He panicked. And he did something unbelievably stupid. He went on the company's public Facebook page and wrote a long post about how the recent management changes were because of others, not him, and hinted that I was the one running the restaurant into the ground. He drew first blood. I had no choice. I knew his secrets, just like he knew I wasn't perfect. I commented right back on his post. I didn't even have to say much. Just a simple, interesting take, Harvey. Maybe you should spend less time messaging the 19-year-old hostesses and more time reading the profit and loss reports. That was the spark that lit the whole forest on fire. The post blew up. Other employees, past and present, started chiming in. Audrey launched a full-blown investigation into Harvey. The girls he'd been harassing finally felt safe enough to talk. 2 weeks later, he was gone. Fired for sexual harassment. I thought it was over. The two biggest problems, Atlas and Harvey, were gone. The storm had passed. But the next morning, Audrey called me into the office again. She closed the door. There was no one else in the room. She wasn't smiling. "Fredo," she said, sliding a thick folder across the table. "With Harvey gone, I've decided to take a closer look at your kitchen's operations. Let's start with your employee files." I stared at the folder she pushed across the table. Employee files. It was such a simple, boring phrase. To her, it was just paperwork. To me, it was a box of dynamite with a lit fuse. Everything I had built, every person I was protecting, was in that folder. My whole system was based on corporate not looking too closely. Now the Eye of Sauron was staring right at it. "Most of that is handled by HR now," I said, trying to sound casual. "I just keep the basics. Schedules, emergency contacts." Audrey smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. It was the smile of a cat who has a mouse cornered. "I'm sure. But corporate policy requires GMs and KMs to maintain duplicate files on site. Let's just make sure everything is compliant." She opened the folder and started pulling out files, one by one. She was methodical, quiet. For the next week, that became my life. I'd run the morning prep, and then she'd call me into the office. She'd hold up a file. "This social security number has one too many digits, Fredo." Probably just a typo, right? Or, It's interesting. 6 of your dishwashers all live at the same address. Is it a boarding house? I had answers for everything. Clerical errors. They're roommates. It saves them money. The language barrier makes filling out forms difficult. My excuses got thinner every day. The pressure was immense. I could feel the trust in the kitchen starting to break. My guys saw me walking into that office with her every day. They saw the look on my face when I came out. They started asking questions I couldn't answer. The family I'd built was starting to look at me not as a protector, but as a liability. The order I'd worked so hard to maintain was cracking. The end came on a Tuesday. It was the middle of the lunch rush. The ticket machine was screaming, pans were sizzling, I was yelling out orders. It was chaos, but it was my chaos. Controlled. Then the back door opened and 2 men in dark suits walked in. They didn't look like health inspectors or food salesmen. They moved with a quiet authority that sucked all the noise out of the room. The pans stopped sizzling. The cooks froze. One of the men looked at me. "Are you Fredo?" he asked. His voice was calm, but it cut through the silence like a knife. I just nodded. "We need you to come with us." The walk from the line to my office was the longest walk of my life. Every single person in that kitchen, my people, my family, watched me go. I could see the fear in their eyes. They knew. When we got to the office, Audrey was sitting there. She didn't look triumphant, just tired. The men identified themselves. FBI. They said they had found evidence of a criminal enterprise involving the procurement of fraudulent government documents. A black market for workers. They laid it all out. They knew about my contact. They knew how the system worked. They had everything. Audrey hadn't just been looking at my files. She had been sending copies to federal investigators for weeks. I was a dead man walking, and I never even knew it. They gave me a choice. I could be the kingpin of a human trafficking operation, or I could be a cooperating witness. It wasn't really a choice at all. So I talked. I gave them the names. I know how that sounds. People will say I sold my own people out to save myself. But they weren't there. They didn't see the years I was looking at. The feds were going to find them anyway, with or without my help. At least this way, I could try to control the fallout. I told myself I was just managing the situation one last time. But when I saw the faces of my guys as they were led away later that week, I knew I had failed them. The one thing I was supposed to do, protect them, I couldn't. The system I built to keep them safe became the trap that caught them all. In the end, everyone points a finger. Harvey was a predator. Fredo was a criminal. But they missed the beginning. They missed the cause. This all started because of one person, Atlas Black. He came in with his bright eyes and his big ideas about fairness and doing things the right way. He didn't see the delicate ecosystem I had built. He didn't see the people who depended on it. He just saw rules being broken and decided he had to be the hero who fixed it. He complained about hours, so I fired him. He got his revenge with a recording. That recording brought Audrey. Audrey dug into Harvey and got him fired. With Harvey gone, she turned on me. Her investigation brought the FBI. And the FBI destroyed everything. It was a chain reaction, and Atlas was the one who lit the first match. He probably thinks he won. He probably tells people the story of how he, a humble carry-out kid, took down a corrupt management team. He probably sleeps well at night thinking he brought justice to that restaurant. But what he calls justice, I call destruction. He didn't save anyone. My guys didn't get better jobs. Most of them were probably deported. The waitresses Harvey harassed were out of work when the restaurant's reputation went down the toilet. The whole place I spent 15 years of my life building was gutted and left to rot. All because one kid couldn't stand not being the star of his own movie. He wanted to be a hero, so he burned the whole world down and called the ashes justice.
Story 12.
I'm sure I'm going to be called a lot of things for what I did. A horrible mother, a cougar, a home wrecker, even though the only home I wrecked was my own. But I need you to understand something. The world starts to shrink when you get to my age. After the divorce, after my son grew up and started his own life, my world got very, very small. It was my house, my job, the grocery store, and my son's visits on Sunday. You stop being a person. You become a role. I was a mother. To my son, I was his rock, the one constant thing in his life he could always count on. I love being that for him, I do. But a rock doesn't get lonely. A rock doesn't lie awake at night wondering if anyone will ever touch her again. A rock doesn't remember being young and full of fire and wonder where that person went. I was tired of being a rock. I was tired of being invisible. I downloaded Tinder. Not for anything serious, and honestly, not even for sex at first. It was more like an experiment. I just wanted to see if anyone out there could still see times me asterisk. The woman, not the mom. I put up a few recent photos, wrote a short bio, and held my breath. And then he messaged me. We can call him Blee Bluepo. He was young, funny, and direct. He wasn't looking for a relationship, he was just looking for a good time. No formalities, his profile said. To me, that sounded like freedom. We talked for a few days, and the conversation was so easy. He didn't ask about my son or my ex-husband or my mortgage. He asked what music I liked and what I liked to drink. He told me I had a great smile. For the first time in over a decade, a man looked at me, even just my picture, with simple, uncomplicated desire. We met for a drink and the chemistry was immediate. We went back to my place. It was thrilling and a little terrifying. For the next 3 months, he was my secret. Once or twice a week, he would come over after my son was gone for the night. We'd have a glass of wine talk, and then we'd end up in my bedroom. In those hours, I wasn't a mother. I wasn't an ex-wife. I wasn't the quiet lady in accounting. I was just a woman alive and wanted, and completely in control. It was my escape, and it made me feel like myself again. The fantasy came crashing down on a Friday afternoon. My son had decided to treat me to lunch, which was one of those sweet things he does that makes my heart ache with love for him. He was telling me about work, about his friends, about a girl he was sort of seeing, normal stuff. I was sitting there, smiling and nodding, feeling like the world's biggest hypocrite. He was talking about his coworkers, and he mentioned Blee Bluepo's name. He said the guy was a bit of a player, always telling these wild stories about his latest hookup. I just nodded, my stomach twisting into a cold, hard knot. When he pulled into my driveway after lunch, my heart stopped. There, parked a few houses down, was a familiar silver sedan. His car. Bleep Lupo's car. He was early. He was supposed to wait for my text. My blood ran cold. My two separate lives, the two halves of my carefully constructed self, were parked on the same street. "What's he doing here, my son?" asked Squinting. He recognized the car. "That's Bleep Lupo." Before I could say anything, my son was out of the car and walking toward him. "Stay here, Mom," he said, like he was protecting me from something. I rushed inside, my hands shaking, and peered through the living room curtains. I saw my son knock on the driver's side window. I saw Bleep Lupo jump looking like a deer in the headlights. The confident, charming man who knew every inch of my body was gone. In his place was a scared little boy who looked like he was about to be sick. I couldn't hear their words, but I saw the whole pathetic performance. Bleep Lupo stumbling out of his car, gesturing vaguely down the street. My son looking confused, pointing back toward our house. Then my son laughed a short, disbelieving sound and clapped him on the shoulder before walking back to me. He came inside, shaking his head. "That was so weird," he said, dropping his keys on the counter. He said he was lost, looking for his cousin's house on Oak Street. There is no Oak Street in this neighborhood. I told him that, and he just got all flustered and said his GPS must be messed up. He lied. To my son. To his friend. On my front lawn. And in that one instant, our secret little affair stopped being my escape. It became sordid. Cheap. The lie he told wasn't just to protect himself. It was to hide times me asterisk. I wasn't a vibrant, desirable woman he was seeing. I was a source of shame, a dirty secret he had to invent a pathetic story to cover up. I felt disgusting. My phone buzzed in my purse. And then buzzed again. And again. A frantic stream of messages. Asterisk. Don't say anything. Asterisk. Asterisk. Please. Call me when he's gone. Asterisk. Asterisk. My job. Our friendship. Please just keep quiet. Asterisk. My son was in the kitchen getting a glass of water, completely oblivious. "You want one, Mom?" he asked. I pulled out my phone. Another message from Bleep Lupo came through. Asterisk. He can't find out. I've told him stuff. Details. He'll put it together. Asterisk. He was worried about the details. Suddenly I felt a hot flash of pure rage. The nights I thought were intimate, the moments I thought were adventurous and just for us, had been turned into locker room stories for him to brag about to his friends. To my son. I was just his conquest. His story. "Mom," my son said, walking back into the living room. "Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I looked up from the phone at his kind, worried face. My wonderful boy who saw me as a rock. The boy Bleep Lupo had been laughing about me with. The choice wasn't even a choice anymore. I would not be a dirty story. I would not be a source of shame. I took a deep, shuddering breath, my decision hardening into something solid and sharp in my chest. "Son," I said, my voice steadier than I expected, "sit down. We need to talk." He sat on the edge of the armchair, the one he'd always loved because it was big enough for him to curl up in when he was a kid. He looked so much like his father in that moment, his brow furrowed with concern. "Talk about what? Is everything okay?" I couldn't sugarcoat it. I couldn't wrap it in a pretty lie to make it easier for him. The whole point was to stop the lying. Blupo, I said the name, feeling like poison in my mouth. He wasn't lost. He wasn't looking for his cousin. My son's confusion deepened. Okay. So what was he doing here? I took a breath and just ripped the Band-Aid off. He was here to see me. We've been seeing each other for about 3 months. The words hung in the air between us, thick and ugly. I watched his face as he processed them. It was like watching a computer program try to run a command it didn't understand. The confusion didn't morph into anger, not at first. It turned into a kind of blank, hollow disbelief. Seeing each other, he repeated slowly, like he was tasting a foreign word. Like, dating. Not. Dating I managed. It was casual. Physical. That was the word that broke the spell. Asterisk. Physical asterisk. His face crumpled. I saw the exact moment the pieces clicked together in his head. The wild stories he told me about at lunch. The bragging. The details. His friend had been telling him stories about his own mother. A wave of nausea washed over him. I could see it in the way the color drained from his face. He looked from me to the window, then back to me, his eyes wide with a kind of horror I had never seen before. The stories he told us, he whispered. The older woman he was hooking up with. The fine-ass cougar. He choked on the words, unable to finish. He stood up, pacing the small living room like a caged animal. He ran a hand through his hair, his whole body vibrating with a mix of shame and rage. All this time. You let me come home and talk about him, he finally asked, his voice cracking. You let me laugh about his stupid stories, and it was you times the whole time. I didn't know he was telling you anything, I said, my own voice rising. I had no idea until he texted me just now. Do you think I would have let that happen? Why him? He demanded, ignoring my question. Of all the men in the world, why my friend, my co-worker? It wasn't supposed to be like this, I said, feeling my composure finally start to break. It was just something for me. It had nothing to do with you. I met him on an app. I didn't even know who he was until our first date, and by then what he spat. It was too good to stop. I didn't have an answer for that, because maybe it was true. He just stood there staring at me, and the look in his eyes was the worst part. He wasn't just looking at his mom anymore. He was looking at a stranger. A woman who had secrets and a life he knew nothing about, and he hated it. He looked utterly and completely betrayed. Without another word, he walked to the door, grabbed his keys from the counter, and left. The slam of the front door echoed in the silent house. My phone, which had been buzzing with Blupo's panicked text just minutes before, was completely quiet. The pleas had stopped. He knew. He must have seen my son storm out and put two and two together. The silence from him was more damning than any angry message could have been. I was alone with the mess I had made. The next few days were the longest of my life. I sent my son a few texts. Asterisk, are you okay? Can we please talk? I love you. Asterisk, they all went unanswered. The house felt huge and empty. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like an accusation. Then on Tuesday, I got a single short message from him. Asterisk. I quit my job today. Couldn't stand to look at him. I'll get my last few things from the house this weekend. Asterisk. My heart sank. That was the one outcome I hadn't truly let myself consider. I had been so focused on my own dignity, on refusing to be a secret, that I hadn't thought about the real-world consequences for my son. I'd broken his friendship, yes, but I'd also pushed him out of his job, a job he liked. A wave of guilt so powerful it almost buckled my knees, washed over me. I sat on my bed and cried, not for my lost affair or my shattered fantasy, but for the pain I had caused my son. He came that Saturday while I was out getting groceries, just as he said he would. When I got home, his old video game console was gone from the living room and a few boxes were missing from his childhood bedroom. He didn't want to see me. He couldn't even stand to be in the same house with me. It took 2 weeks before he spoke to me again. He showed up for our usual Sunday dinner, but nothing was usual about it. The easy chatter we used to share was gone, replaced by a thick, awkward silence. He answered my questions in single words. He didn't ask me anything about my week. He just ate his food staring at his plate, and I could feel him looking at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. He was studying me, trying to reconcile the woman in front of him with the mother he thought he knew. The affair is over. Lupo vanished from my life as quickly as he entered it. My relationship with my son is fractured, maybe permanently. There's a distance between us now that feels like a canyon. I know I hurt him, and that regret is a heavy weight I will carry forever. But as I watch him across the dinner table, I see something else in his eyes too. Confusion, yes. Hurt, absolutely. But he sees times me. For the first time, he is looking at me not as the rock, not as the static, reliable figure of mom, but as a complete person. A flawed, complicated sexual person who makes mistakes. I didn't do it to hurt him. I did it because I couldn't stand being a caricature in a story told behind my back. I couldn't be someone's dirty little secret, especially not to my own son. The price was terribly high, and my home is much quieter now. But it is my home. I am not hiding anymore. And I will not be anyone's story but my own.
Story 13.
I'm probably going to sound like the bad guy here. I get it. I'm the crazy ex-girlfriend, the one who couldn't let go. That's the easy story, the one he's probably telling her right now. But you don't know him like I do. You don't know the man I built. When I met Liam, he was nice. That's the best word for him. He wore beige sweaters, drank light beer, and thought a wild Friday night was staying up to watch The Late Show. He was living in black and white, and honestly, he seemed perfectly happy with it. But I saw something in his eye. A little flicker of someone who wanted more but was too scared to ask for it. I was the one who brought color into his life. Our relationship wasn't about dates and holding hands. It was an explosion. I pushed him. I challenged everything he thought he knew about himself. He called it toxic and abusive at the end, throwing those words around like they were nothing. But when we were in it, he called it alive. He'd never felt more alive. I taught him how to stop apologizing for existing. I got him to trade his boring sweaters for a leather jacket. I took him to underground clubs, got him into fights he didn't start, and showed him that life wasn't something you plan in a spreadsheet. It was messy and loud and incredible. And yes, our sex life was part of that. It was intense, primal. We filmed it because we wanted to capture that energy. Those videos weren't just sex tapes. They were proof. Proof that this quiet, predictable man could be a force of nature. He loved it. He loved that I took charge, that I wasn't afraid to be aggressive. He was never more himself than he was in those moments with the camera on, completely letting go of the scared little boy he used to be. Then he left. He said he needed peace. He said he needed stability. What he really meant was that he was scared. The fire we started was getting too big for him to handle, so he ran. He ran right into the arms of the safest, most predictable woman he could find. Her. I saw the engagement photos on a mutual friend's social media. There he was, standing in a field of flowers, wearing a light blue button-down shirt, tucked in. He had that same pleasant, empty smile he had when I first met him. And next to him was her. She looked exactly like you'd expect. Pretty simple, smiling like she just won the lottery for a lifetime supply of vanilla ice cream. My first feeling wasn't anger or jealousy. It was pity. Deep, profound pity for him. He had undone all my work. It was like he'd taken the incredible, vibrant masterpiece we had created together and painted over it with a roller and a can of boring off-white paint. He was erasing himself, and she was helping him do it. For a few weeks I tried to ignore it. Let him have his quiet little life. But it ate at me. He was lying to himself, and he was lying to her. She was agreeing to marry a man she'd never truly met. The real Liam, the one who screamed with passion and wasn't afraid to lose control, was buried somewhere deep inside this new, boring version of himself. She deserved to know who she was really getting into bed with for the rest of her life. It wasn't a malicious plan. It was an intervention. An act of honesty. I found her profile easily enough. It was public, of course, full of pictures of lattes, sunsets, and them holding hands. It was a perfect catalog of a boring life. I went through our old files and picked out a few clips. Not the craziest ones, but the ones that showed his face the most. The moments he looked truly free, wild, and completely mine. A highlight reel of the man she thought she knew. I sent them to her in a direct message. My hands were shaking a little, but my head was clear. I knew what I had to do. I attached the clips and wrote a simple, honest message. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact. Asterisk. You may be marrying him, but you will never be able to satisfy him the way I did. Asterisk. Because she couldn't. You can't just flip a switch and create that kind of chemistry. We forged ours in fire over years of breaking down his walls. She was just decorating the outside of a prison he'd built for himself. Then I sent the same videos to him. Not to be cruel, I did it to remind him. I wanted to shock his system, jolt him out of the beige-colored dream he was living in. I wanted him to see what he was giving up. I wanted him to look at her, then look at the man in those videos, and see the truth. I was giving him one last chance to wake up before he made the biggest mistake of his life. I hit send on both messages and put my phone down on the table. My heart was pounding. This was it. The moment of truth. I expected an explosion. An angry call from him screaming at me. A hysterical, tearful message from her. Something. Anything. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was him, but it wasn't a message, it was just a notification. When I tried to click on his name, his profile was gone. User not found. He'd blocked me. Instantly. No fight, no final words. Just silence. A coward's silence. That's how I knew I'd hit a nerve. He couldn't face it. He couldn't face me. He couldn't face himself. That was his answer. But what about hers? I checked our message thread. The videos were still there. And underneath the last one, there were two little words that made my blood run cold and hot at the same time. Seen. Seen. She's seen them. And since then, nothing. Absolute silence. Her profile is still active. She hasn't blocked me. The message just sits there, a digital bomb I've rolled into her perfect little life. Now all I can do is wait for it to go off. The waiting was the worst part. For 3 days, her silence was a constant noise in my head. I'd pick up my phone, check the message thread, and see those two little words, times, seen asterisk. It felt like she was looking right at me, judging me from behind her screen. I imagined every possible scenario. Her crying her eyes out. Her screaming at Liam, throwing the engagement ring back in his face. I kept refreshing her social media, waiting for the inevitable sad quote or for their smiling couple photos to disappear. Nothing. In fact, it was the opposite. The day after I sent the videos, she posted a picture of them at a farmer's market holding hands over a basket of apples. The caption was sickeningly sweet. Perfect Sunday with my perfect guy. It was a performance. It had to be. No one sees what I sent and just goes to buy apples. She was trying to prove a point to show me she wasn't bothered. But I knew better. The bomb had gone off. She was just pretending she couldn't hear the ringing in her ears. On the 4th day, there was a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole and my stomach dropped. It was her, the fiancée. Standing there on my welcome mat, holding a coffee cup, looking as calm as if she were here to borrow a cup of sugar. My mind raced. Was she here to fight? To scream, I braced myself, opened the door, and leaned against the frame, trying to look bored. "Can I help you?" She gave me a small, sad smile. "I thought we should talk." I almost laughed. "I think the videos did all the talking, don't you?" "They did," she said, her voice even. "That's why I'm here. Can I come in?" Something about her complete lack of fear made me uneasy. I stepped aside and let her in. She stood in the middle of my living room, looking around for a second before turning back to me. She wasn't the meek little thing from her photos. She was composed, steady. So I started crossing my arms. "Now you've seen him. The real him. The man who isn't satisfied with vanilla." She took a slow sip of her coffee. "I did see him," she said. And my first thought wasn't about the sex. It was that I didn't recognize the look in his eyes. "That's because you've never seen him truly alive," I shot back. "No," she said softly, and the word hung in the air between us. "It's because I've never seen him look so scared. I watched those videos and I didn't see a man who was wild and free. I saw a man who was performing. I saw someone desperately trying to keep up, trying to be the person you were demanding he be. It wasn't passion. It was panic. Her words hit me like a slap. I opened my mouth to argue, but nothing came out. She kept going. Liam told me all about you. He called your relationship the crucible. He said he thought for a long time that the intensity was love, that the chaos meant he was living. But it wasn't living. It was surviving. He wasn't a masterpiece you created. He was a prisoner of war, and he finally escaped. He loved it, I whispered, the words sounding weak even to my own ears. He loved me. She finally showed a flicker of emotion. It was pity. He was addicted to the drama you created, and you were addicted to having control. What you call love, he now calls trauma. The man I'm marrying isn't a boring, safe version of the one you knew. He's the real version. He's the man he was before you got your hands on him. He's gentle and kind, and for the first time in years, he's peaceful. He's happy. She placed her coffee cup on my table. I'm not here to fight with you. Honestly, I'm here because I wanted to thank you. You sent me those videos to hurt me, to blow up my life. But all you did was show me exactly what he ran away from. You showed me the ghost he's so relieved to be free of. You confirmed that choosing a quiet life with me was the best decision he ever made. She walked to the door and paused. He blocked you because he's done. I won't be blocking you because you have no power over me. Goodbye. And then she was gone. I just stood there in the total silence of my apartment, the smell of her coffee still in the air. My whole story, the entire foundation of what I believed had just been demolished in under 5 minutes. My phone buzzed on the counter. I picked it up, my hands trembling. It was a message from a number I no longer had saved, but I knew who it was. He'd unblocked me. Just for this. The message was short. Asterisk. She told me she was going to talk to you. I hope now you'll understand. We are happy. Please leave us alone. Asterisk. I tried to reply, to type something, anything, but when I hit send, the message failed. User not found. He was gone again. Forever. I sank onto my couch, the strength gone from my legs. I thought about the videos again, but this time I saw them through her eyes. I saw his face, the strange smile, the sweat on his brow. Was it passion or was it pressure? Was he a force of nature or just a boy trying to impress the girl who scared him? I thought I was planting a seed of truth in their perfect little world. But they had planted a seed of doubt in mine, and it was already taking root. I had pictured myself as a ghost in their bedroom, a constant reminder of a passion they could never recreate. Now I see the truth. I am a ghost. But I'm not a temptation. I'm a haunting. I'm the nightmare he wakes up from relieved to find that he's safe in his quiet, beige, peaceful bed. And he is never, ever coming back.